Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/GOM.
I'm hungry. You're hungry.
5 horses, 5 men. More than I feel like killing on an empty stomach.
I know him. The small one. His name is Pulliver. He captured us and took us to Harrenhal. He killed Lomi.
What the fuck's a lomi?
He was my friend. Pulliver stole my sword and put it right through his neck. He still got it.
Got what?
My sword. Needle.
Needle. Of course you named your sword.
Lots of people name their swords.
Lots of cunts.
Well met, Thens and Oathkeepers, and welcome to Game of Microphones. I'm Lord Sterling, Sir Duncan, Harbinger of Nightfall, and this is episode 73. Today I'd like to welcome back Lady Rachel of House Fox. Welcome back to Game of Microphones, my lady.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Hi, fellow Throners. Hope you're having a great day.
Yeah, same here. And just so everybody knows, Lady Rachel will be joining us regularly as much as possible. So thanks again for that.
Yay, I'm so excited to be a regular.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. On this episode of our series Rewatch, we're covering Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 1, Two Swords. And for anybody who's not aware already, this is a spoiler-filled podcast from the perspective of someone who's current on the show, Game of Thrones. That means you've seen all the way up through Season 7. So, you lived your life for the king, but there's still time to die for some chicken, so you don't hear these spoilers.
Warning.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. This is a great episode, huh?
It's really good. I watched it again today on my lunch break, and I just forgot kind of how much happens in this episode.
So much.
It's a great season opener for season 4.
Yeah, I agree. This is a great opener. Get a taste of all our favorite characters, some new characters introduced as well, and just a lot of cool stuff. The dragons are big now, and
yeah,
right?
Yeah. They're huge. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, huge and scary.
Yeah, they're nasty.
All right, so let's jump right into it. What is your number 5, Lady Rachel?
My number 5 is The Golden Hand.
Nice. That
Yes.
is my number 1, so we can cover that together.
Oh, really? Okay. Cool. We can collaborate. So,
Yeah.
Obviously, this is Jaime getting his golden hand. And actually, I found this kind of interesting because while it's about Jaime getting his golden hand, the scene really shows Cersei for her true personality. I feel like she really kind of shines in this scene where she goes, "We've labored days over this hand," and he goes, "Days." She goes, "Better part of an afternoon."
Yeah.
And then talking about Pycelle smelling like a dead cat, and Jaime's like, "I don't know what a dead cat smells like," and she goes like, "Well, he smells like Pycelle."
Yeah, like she gets a rare comedic moment here, which is kind of unusual for the Cersei character. Normally she's screaming at people or just being wretched in a manner of ways, but here, she gets that lighthearted moment. Well, they smell like Pycelle,
Yeah,
Made me
so I
chuckle.
mean, she was just kind of bantering back and forth with him, and I did pick up, and I've picked this up a few times, and I've just forgotten to ask people or bring it up, but when she is talking to Qyburn when Jamie walks in, he's asking him if all her symptoms are gone.
Yeah, what do you think he's talking about?
I wonder, and she was like, oh, thanks for, your help. And he goes, come see me anytime. I felt like it was having to do with like
moon tea, like she was pregnant or something.
Yeah, I got that kind of vibe from that conversation, because the way Pycelle was kind of like quiet and soft about it, like it wasn't like, are you feeling better? It's like, have your symptoms gone away, I think were his exact words. That's a very particular way to ask someone if they're feeling better.
Yeah, I was noticing that for the first time as well, and was sort of taken or caught off guard by it, wondering what they were talking about. And there are rumors certainly that Cersei has had carnal relations with people other than Robert for one, but other than Jaime mainly. So it's entirely possible.
I was thinking Lancel,
right?
Because they show her having sex with Lancel,
right?
But as far as like timeline goes, it might pan out that
it might
that happen.
That's a great point too, because since we got interrupted with the rewatch, it's I'm not really like I didn't get a chance to go back and watch everything again to lead up to this moment, so I had totally forgotten that that Lancel stuff had happened in the relatively near past at this point. So yeah, it's entirely possible that Lancel could have knocked her up.
Yeah, so it was just kind of an interesting, just very quick dialogue. I mean, I've picked up on it before, but when we do this rewatch, I watch the show with such a keen eye that
right.
I've picked up on it before, and I thought to myself, like, that's a weird statement, but I never really thought about it to discuss it on air per se.
Sure.
I feel like it's hinting towards she was pregnant.
The seed is strong.
The seed is strong. I'm not sure from Lancel, but
yeah, true.
I don't know.
That's great.
But yeah, I love when Jamie says to her, like, you're drinking more, and she goes into like her little monologue of, my husband died in a tragic hunting accident.
It must have been traumatic for you. Sarcasm.
Yeah, she's great in this scene. From a pure Cersei personality perspective, we really get to see. It reminded me of the scene with her and Robert when they were talking about what held the Seven Kingdoms up for so long, and she goes, our marriage.
Right. Yeah,
and
that was a great
laughing.
scene. That was a really powerful scene.
It echoed that scene for me, and I believe they're in the same room as that scene.
Oh, wow. I think they are, actually, now that you mention it. That's pretty crazy.
And I think maybe Cersei, I also love the line, like, father disowned me today. And, at some point, I think she calls him you're the golden son at some point earlier on in the episode.
In the series?
Or not in the series, yeah, when they, are talking, like, she had to wear a dress, she had to learn how to curtsy, and he got to go out and fight and learn how to hunt, and, and I find it interesting that this, comment came when he's getting his golden hand. So
yeah, definitely.
Being that father disowned him, is he not the golden son anymore?
Well, her response is that he can't disown you because you're all he's got. You're forgetting Tyrion.
That little lecher.
Yeah.
But I also feel like maybe because when Jamie starts to advance on Cersei, she shuts him down.
Yeah, she's
like
super
pretty
cold.
quickly. And I'm wondering if it's because she just had an abortion.
Oh, yeah. That
so I'm
may be.
I'm trying to figure out, because
it's been weeks since he's been back, supposedly. So if she was pregnant or something, yeah.
That those are pretty much my bullet points with this. What do you have to say about this scene?
Oh man, there's a lot. Since Cersei was so cold to him and he just got his golden hand, I titled this my number one. It was For Hands of Gold Are Always Cold, which sort of harkens back to that song that was written about Tyrion and visiting his secret whore Shay.
Yes.
So I don't know, just lots of cool stuff here. I like how Qyburn is admiring the quality of the piece. A work of art, really. You know, the craftsmanship is excellent. And Jamie gives him a retort: "If you like it so much, you're welcome to chop off your own hand and take it."
And then he kind of like twists it on.
Yeah, and he's like, ugh. He also says that a hook would be more practical, and there's got to be some sort of reference that he's making there, maybe, or something, but I'm drawing a blank on it. Also, I think it's cool. It's pretty clever. Cersei says that the hand is elegant, and it made me think of the showrunners, because this is sort of an elegant solution to a CG problem that they could have had. They made the hand, you can tell if you look at it, slightly bigger than a regular hand. And that's because it's essentially a glove that Nikolai Coster-Waldau, the actor, puts his hand in. So it's bigger than his hand, and that way that they don't have to like do any CG work or anything like that, any After Effects. So pretty slickly done.
Yeah, and it's not overly large too, where it's noticeable. I mean, it's clearly bigger than a hand, but
it's not monstrous. Like they did
not monstrous.
They did it pretty well.
It must be pretty thin.
Yeah, really thin. And think about this though. Gold is so heavy. If that was actually a hand of gold, that much gold, that would weigh like at least 10 pounds, probably. Oh, yeah. You know, 10,
what is it?
20
Gilded
pounds.
Steel.
Oh, I think technically it may be gilded steel. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So they're talking about Qyburn after he kind of walks away, and Jaime calls him an odd little man, and Cersei says she's grown rather fond of him, which sort of foreshadows their close relationship in the future. With
definitely,
they end up being sort of buddy with Qyburn, making the ballista and doing all kinds of crazy stuff for Cersei, getting rid of Pycelle.
The mountain.
Yeah, creating the mountain, great, all kinds of stuff like that. So when she's going off on all of the things, all the reasons why she's drinking, she talks about how Robert died, her daughter was shipped off to Dorne, suffered through a siege, which Jaime kind of makes light of, because he doesn't understand like what was happening. A rather short siege, and she points out that we pretty much thought we were all gonna die, so it's not fucking funny.
I mean, short or long, she was pretty certain that it was over. I mean, they're sitting on the Iron Throne with essence of nightshade. She's about ready to poison her son and kill herself.
So serious, like that's just about as serious as it gets. And then when the door opens, it's not the invading army. It's not Stannis Baratheon that rolls through. It's Tywin, and she drops the bottle. Oh man, such a crazy moment.
I can't imagine the relief she must have felt.
Yeah,
like that, or honestly, the terror and then the immediate relief, to hear them outside the door.
Even more than terror, it's like horror, like the horror of having to kill her own son.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's so brutal. So then she also mentions that she's marrying her eldest son to a wicked little bitch from Highgarden.
I laughed at that.
Well, she's supposed to marry her brother, a renowned pillow biter.
Pillow biter.
Yeah, I just thought that's such a hilarious term. So funny.
And she has such an arrogant way of talking in this scene.
Oh, yeah. In every scene.
She's kind of flipping her hand around and, swinging her wine glass around.
Yep.
She's pure Cersei in this scene.
Perfect casting, too. Lena Headey, really nails her whole attitude. I can't imagine this show with different actors.
Have you ever seen the video of when she appears? I think it's on Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Kimmel. What is she doing on there, though?
Jimmy Kimmel makes her talk to him like she was Cersei, so he would ask her questions and she would respond as Cersei would respond.
And she nails it.
It's so funny. She nails it. It's great.
I thought it would be fun to talk to each other Game of Thrones style. Okay? All right, so... Shall we begin?
Yes.
How do you? Well, should I pour the drink or do you
Don't touch it.
How does? Okay, don't touch it. All right. We've already begun. Okay,
Yes.
here we go. Thank you.
That is a lovely tie. It's a shame it's around such a worthless neck.
Well, thank you for coming today. I know you have a busy schedule doing sex with your brother. It must be so exhausting.
Yeah, I'll post it on Facebook. So if you
Yeah,
guys want to
it's
check
awesome.
it out, facebook.com/GOM podcast, and you'll be able to find that video linked up there. So we got a couple scenes with Jamie talking about staying or leaving the Kingsguard in this episode, and obviously Tywin wants him to leave the Kingsguard, and there's some background information with that about how basically the Mad King Aerys screwed over the Lannisters and intentionally made Jamie a member of the Kingsguard just to fuck with Tywin, basically to eliminate his heir from the picture of being able to inherit the Casterly Rock and the lordship and everything. So Tywin sees Jamie's hand being cut off as an opportunity to reverse that and to put Jamie back in line to inherit Casterly Rock. But Jamie, in the scene with Tywin, he seems to like not even understand that whole aspect of it. He's content with being a glorified bodyguard, as Tywin puts it. But here, it's his ulterior motive is revealed. He may understand what Tywin was saying, but it seems like he really just wants to keep fucking his sister.
Pretty much.
Staying
yeah.
in the Kingsguard means I live right here in the Red Keep with you, And so that pretty much explains his motivation for wanting to stay in the Kingsguard. And it's pretty messed up how he makes an advance on Cersei and she pushes him back and he says, "When, I've been back for weeks," and she kind of like turns away and he's like, "Something's changed." She says, "Everything's changed." And she's super pissed at him for leaving her and being gone and letting all this stuff happen while he was away, all these hardships that she's been through. And she's selfishly refusing to even acknowledge her love's struggle in favor of dwelling in her own pain, which is just kind of selfish of her and true to the character for sure.
Yes, for sure.
It's pretty sad because he really wanted to get back. He's like he said, every day I was a prisoner. I plotted my escape. Every day I murdered
people for you.
So I could be here with you. And he not only did he murder people, but he was essentially a kinslayer. He killed his own blood, his cousin, to escape Robb's captivity, at least to try. So yeah, he really went to some crazy lengths to do that, even killing a Lannister, pretty serious.
True.
So for her to just
stuff.
for her to just blow it all off and be mad, like he didn't know he was going to be captured, like he said. So
yeah, and her only really real reason for it is that you took too long, and it's like, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah, it's pretty fucked. But you can't really expect her to be thinking from a logical perspective. She's always does everything based on emotion,
That's very true.
Yeah. So that pretty much wraps up my number 1 and your number 5. How about your number 4?
What about your number 5?
Oh, right. Number 5. Yeah. That's a good idea, huh?
Maybe. Who knows?
My number 5 is Two Swords. Like the episode title.
Okay.
Episode starts off with a cold open, which for anybody who's unaware is when you jump right into the episode before the title sequence. And it's not something that Game of Thrones does a lot. There's only a few times where they've done a cold open. So it's,
if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 3.
Oh, all right.
Or 4. Yeah, it's very, very rare.
Yeah.
I think I might piggyback on you because this is part of it's kind of my number 1. I split the Two Swords up, but
Sure.
I might jump in with you because some of this is my number one too.
Perfect. So the scene opens without dialogue. There's no dialogue in this whole opening scene, which is intense on its own. But to make it even more intense, the Rains of Castamere is sadly playing as House Stark is symbolically destroyed by the melting of the heirloom ice.
You know what's funny, though, is it starts off with Stark music, and then it turns to Rains of Castamere.
Oh, man, I totally missed that.
Yeah. It starts off, so as he's walking... As he's pulling the sword, as he's pulling ice out of the wolf pelt, or the sheath, I guess.
Yeah.
It's playing the Stark music, and as he walks over, it's playing the Stark music, and when he throws it in the fires, when it turns to Rains of Castamere.
Oh, it's so brutal.
Ramin Djawadi is a genius.
He really is. He really is. The minute details and alterations that he makes in the various themes and motifs to reflect the emotion and gravity of each individual scene is really impressive. Like he's a serious professional. So the handle is struck off of ice and Tywin looks contented, like a mission long in the making has been accomplished. And then the wolf sheath is burned, like you were saying, and Tywin smiles for one of the only times we ever see him smile on the show. And then it cuts to the main credits. That is an intense moment right there, and no words even had to be said to convey the gravity of what was happening in this whole scene. Very good filmmaking.
Oh, it was so sadly beautiful because like you see ice kind of melting and the way it's shimmering and the heat's coming off of it and then they're pouring it out. The cinematography of that whole scene is just so well done. And I've said this over and over again, so you can call me a broken record if you want. I really, really feel that this show, some of the most epic scenes are the wordless scenes.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And this is a great example of that too.
Yeah, so I have a note that I find it really interesting that we're starting off season 4 with a very visual reference of ice and fire.
Oh, great.
Not just from like the perspective that ice is named ice, but the Starks are, the northern people, and the Lannisters, their sigil is a lion. And in our world, the lion is a symbol of the sign Leo, and Leo is a fire sign.
Oh,
so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Summer.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of just interesting as well. And, we actually kind of get a glimpse of the episode is named Two Swords, but we actually get a glimpse of 4 swords in this episode. We get ice. We meet, while it's not named yet, Oathkeeper.
Yep.
We meet Widow's Wail, which we just get a very short glimpse of in this particular scene while it's still cooling. And we get Needleback at the end.
Yep.
So we have 2 Stark swords appearing, and we have 2 Lannister swords appearing in this short little scene.
Yeah, very interesting. And we see other swords too, but nothing like that's like significant. Like we see the Hound's sword, but we don't have a name for it or anything like that.
Sure, I don't think he has named his sword because when
cunts name their swords.
Yes, exactly. And then I know we see Jon Snow, but just specifically those, we see 3 in one scene at the very beginning of the episode. One of which is being decimated to create the Lannister sword, so it's kind of symbolizing the death of the Stark household. But then at the very end, we find Needle, and it's kind of like the rebirth.
Getting one back.
Yeah, and I really think that Arya is kind of the avenger of the Starks. So to end that, very symbolic first scene, to end that episode with her getting her sword back is very foretelling.
She's the Tony Stark.
Oh my god, I didn't even realize that reference. Iron Man,
Yeah,
Iron Woman.
That's great.
Oh, you know what's crazy?
What?
That coin she carries around is made of iron.
Oh yeah, true. Iron coin for the Iron Maiden, you could say.
Yes, and with Reigns of Castamere playing in the background while he's, melting down ice is just so symbolic of the Lannisters.
Another Lannister victory.
Yeah, they're obliterating kind of what he thinks they are obliterating another house because
Yeah, he does.
Sansa's a Lannister at this point. Arya is presumed dead. Jon is a brother of the Night's Watch, and it's presumed that Bran and Rickon are dead as well. So he
Right,
is,
that's a great
and
point.
Robb is dead, and Catelyn's dead. So in his mind, he has wiped out the Stark line, which is
Great
not
point.
true.
And so it's
Yeah.
like after he waited until, because he's had ice since season 1, he waited until after all the Starks were wiped out, or so he thought, to destroy the sword. I wonder if there was some reason that he did that.
I think he didn't it was like a celebratory situation. I'm gonna wait until all the Starks are dead.
That's the bottle of champagne that he's been saving.
Yeah, that's the
crack,
Dom Perignon that you crack open.
Yeah. So yeah, these 4 swords each had a big moment in this episode: the destruction of ice, the creation of Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper, and the return of Needle, which is awesome.
Yes, yes.
So next scene after the credits, it cuts back to Jaime inspecting Oathkeeper, and it's beautiful, and he notices that it looks fresh forged, and he said he's confused by this because, like he mentions, no one's made a Valyrian steel sword since the Doom of Valyria. So Tywin says, that there are only 3 smiths who know how to rework Valyrian steel, and the finest of them was in Volantis. So he invited him to King's Landing to work with this. And and Jaime's like, "Where did you get this much Valyrian steel?" He should know, Although
I think he does.
He fled the city before Ned was killed, though. So
that's true.
Maybe he didn't put 2 and 2 together, because they had that conflict in the street where Ned got stabbed through the leg, and Jaime sort of left from there, essentially. So
that's right.
So Tywin's response is classic: from someone who no longer had need of it. Dead Ned doesn't need that sword anymore.
Right.
And so Jaime replies to him, "You've wanted one of these in the family for a long time. And now we have 2, Tywin replies. And he's even more confused by this. 2? And Tywin, if Jaime didn't know that it was ice beforehand, he should know now. He replies to him, "The original weapon was absurdly large." Which is true. It's very, very wide for a blade. It's like, I have a couple replicas of the sword, and it's like literally as wide as my hand, the palm of my hand. It's really freaking wide. But
isn't it really tall too? Because I remember, I'm not sure how tall Sean Bean is, but when he's standing there about ready to cut off the deserter of the Night's Watch in the very first episode, the hilt comes up to his mid chest, and he's holding it in the ground, and it's seems really long too. I mean, it's almost like a decorative sword for just executions, and it's not really a sword that you could fight with on the battlefield.
Typically it would not be with the weight of steel, but considering it's Valyrian steel, the blade is very light, and you would be able to fight with it, which is cool. There's a great YouTube channel called Shadiversity. This Australian guy, I think Shad, goes and analyzes all he does all kinds of medieval stuff, and he does analyses of the castles in Game of Thrones to see if they make sense and would be functional castles, etc. But he does a really good video about the sword Ice, where he talks about how it's not quite as long as you would expect a two-handed greatsword to be, but it's much wider and would be balanced differently than a typical long sword. So it's about the length of a long sword, but you, considering its weight, if it was steel, you'd have to use like two-handed greatsword moves for it. So you'd be stuck with this one specific move set, but then at the same time, you wouldn't have the length that a two-handed greatsword would have, so you'd be at a disadvantage. But he forgets to take into account that the sword would be made from Valyrian steel, which would make it functional as a long sword.
Interesting. I totally forgot that Valyrian steel was supposed to be really light.
Yeah, really light. And in the books, it's actually described as being even bigger, a full two-handed long sword, or great sword, I should say, that's even longer with a big long handle and everything. It's pretty cool. So there's that, and definitely check out that video by Shadiversity. We should probably post that too, huh?
Probably.
Yeah, because it's cool. So I'll do that. And so we learned here that the Lannisters have wanted Valyrian steel in their family for a long time, which made me think about how at one point the Lannister family did have a Valyrian steel blade named Bright Roar, and it was lost in the doom of Valyria. And Tywin's brother, the youngest of the siblings, Garyon Lannister, he was actually lost to the doom while searching for the ancestral blade, Bright Roar. I have an excerpt from a wiki of Ice and Fire to read.
Oh, nice.
Circa 291 AC, Garyon went on a quest to find House Lannister's ancestral Valyrian steel sword, Bright Roar, and any other treasures that may have survived the doom of Valyria. Almost a decade passed after his ship, the Laughing Lion, left Lannisport, but Garyon never returned. Lord Tywin sent men to look for his lost brother, and they traced him as far as Volantis, where half his crew had deserted him because of his intent to sail into the smoking sea. He had been forced to buy slaves to replace them. So that's the end of Garyon Lannister, as far as we know.
Wow.
That's from a wiki of Ice and Fire. So it's like a compilation of book stuff, which is kind of cool.
I love that website.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's so good.
You can spend hours on it.
Yeah, totally. And then we have Jaime talking about how he will have to be using his left hand, right? So Tywin tells him, you'll have to train your left hand. And he says, any decent swordsman knows how to use both hands. But he's sort of covering for his lack of ability with bravado and bluster here in this moment, because as we know,
Completely.
He can't use his left hand at all. That becomes sort of a theme throughout this episode, where he's like pretending that he can still fight. Like when Meryn Trant tells him, well, I've become accustomed to guarding the king since you've been gone. He's like, thanks, but I'll be taking care of that. But obviously Meryn is worried because he's missing his sword hand. So he doesn't think that Jaime will still be capable of protecting the king.
I mean, even Joffrey in that scene is worried about it. He's like, you can't protect anyone with that.
Right.
And he goes, I'll use my left hand now, Your Grace. It makes more of a contest.
Yeah, another great line full of bravado and his confidence.
Yeah, and in this scene, I mean, he even says to Tywin, Tywin says, well, you won't be as good. And he goes, it doesn't really matter as long as I'm better than everyone else.
Right. Yeah. He was really good beforehand. Oh, man.
And I love his last line. He's like, well, supper would be nice.
Yeah. He's always got something smart ass to say.
Totally.
He's like the king of smart ass remarks in the show. Oh, man.
But I do like the scene that you're talking about now, because when Tywin is telling him you're going to return back to Casterly Rock and, take the seat as my heir, and Jaime goes, Kingslayer, Oathbreaker, man without honor. Now you're asking me to break another oath.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's very telling about how really Jaime kind of feels about those titles, because, in the earlier seasons, before we got to know more in depth about his character, and especially obviously before his bath scene with Brienne, it seemed to be like he kind of relished in those titles. Like,
yeah,
he
like
liked when people, yeah. And, the scene with Brienne in the bathtub is very, the most telling of it all, that it really does bother him. It really does get to him. And again, in this scene here, we see that irritates him that he is asked to hold so many oaths and be forced to break some of them because of all of the oaths that he has to take. They start contradicting each other.
Yeah, you made a really good point about how he seemed to like revel in those names. And it's sort of like he had adopted Tyrion's mantra of wearing it like armor so nobody could hurt him with it.
Absolutely.
So it's obvious at this point Jaime really doesn't want any further dishonor. And like you said, this is after his fevered bathhouse revelation to Brienne and his nuanced takes on oaths to Cat. So we know at this point that he's more complex than we originally thought, and he's certainly not just a bad guy who doesn't care about honor or what people think of him. He really is like a tormented soul.
I have in my notes here when Brienne is back in King's Landing and they're down by the Godswood looking at Sansa. I mean, Brienne is still holding Jaime to his vow about keeping Sansa safe, getting the Stark girls home, and
keeping his oath.
Yeah. And Jaime kind of brushes her off at this point, and he's like, Sansa's a Lannister. Arya's probably dead. Their mother's dead. What do you want me to do? And she kind of leans into him. She's like, do you honestly think Sansa being in King's Landing is the safest place for her? And again, he kind of realizes like, man, she's right. I do have this oath to keep. So just again, another great example of Jaime understanding who he is and that it does bother him. But I think he's so used to just kind of brushing oaths off here and there that he was going to do it to Brienne, and Brienne's not the person to do that to.
Right, and I think this scene in particular sort of stands out to him. He must saturate into his mind after the fact, and he realizes that she is like the epitome of one dedicated to keeping her oaths, and obviously that's plays a part in the naming of the sword and him choosing to pass it on to her, and as well as the set of armor, you know.
Totally.
Speaking of that scene, he reacts to her saying, "Are you sure you're not a Lannister?" You know, which is kind of funny because obviously
I thought it was too. I think it foreshadows them hooking up.
Yeah, it foreshadows their sort of special relationship that they make because we know he loves the ladies in his family, which is horrible.
I know, and she's blonde.
Yeah, and so whereas Cersei mirrors Jaime in terms of beauty, from youth, they always looked very alike, and they were both very like handsome and beautiful and widely known for their good looks. On the other hand, Brienne mirrors Jaime in terms of her capability and swordsmanship. So there are parallels between there's more than one reason why it would make sense for her to be considered a Lannister.
Totally.
You know, which is kind of funny. So
stubborn, quick-witted,
right?
You know,
and so naturally, if Jaime can no longer function, and there's a Lannister equivalent with his type of fighting capability, it makes sense for him to pass on the blade and the armor to Brienne in this circumstance.
And what an honor for Brienne. You know, I think it's the next episode that she gets Oathkeeper, but what an honor for Brienne to receive that Valyrian steel sword.
Yeah, that is not an everyday occurrence.
No, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on our next rewatch, but you know, it was made from ice and she's using it to protect the Stark girls and find Arya. So I just loved that. Very poetic, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So that pretty much wraps up my number 5 and the two swords dialogue. So let's move on to your number 4.
My number 4 is Jon.
Awesome.
I loved this. Like you said at the beginning, like we kind of get reacclimated with all of the characters. They don't really focus on one specific character this episode. We kind of touch upon everybody. And I love this, you know, ongoing scene with Jon when he learns of Rob's death and he's talking to Sam about he's been jealous of Rob his whole life. He was better at me than at everything. I wanted to hate him, but I never could. I thought that was just really powerful, and it stems into kind of Jon, why he has kind of a chip on his shoulder, why he thinks it's a great honor to carry his house's sigil. He has such a great relationship with his brother, but there's always been this dissonance with his brother.
Yeah, and I love how Sam was able to put it in perspective to Jon, because Jon has, like you said, he has this chip on his shoulder. He's grew up in the castle. When he first showed up to Castle Black, he had trouble relating to people. He didn't realize how privileged he was, and he would sort of take it out on the other guys, not understanding the way that he came across to them as like this privileged punk who's really good at everything, and like grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth, essentially. Castle forged steel, high quality garb and armor and whatnot. So he's talking here about how much he loved it, but also hated Rob at the same time, basically. Sometimes I wanted to hate him, because he was better than me at everything, and better at swords, at fighting, at riding, at girls. And I'm just thinking that, like, damn, he must have been really good at fighting and stuff if he was better than Jon, because Jon is like, he's like superstar fighter. At least
right.
He develops into one for sure.
I think he develops into one because I think what happens is Rob and Jon were trained in the traditional manner of having a master at arms, training them in the art of swordplay. And Rob, used that strategy to Tyrion's point. This kid had never lost a battle, and yet he's dead,
right.
because they basically cheated. But, he was clearly an amazing fighter. But I think what makes Jon a better fighter is the time that he spent with the wildlings and that kind of raw, unruly, wild nature.
It's essentially
takes over.
It's like Rob is a boxer and Jon is a mixed martial artist, basically.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
He has influences from various styles playing in to give him a more well-rounded grasp on fighting as a whole, as opposed to like a singular perspective coming from one discipline, where like Rob would have from being trained as by a master in arms, like you were saying. So that's kind of cool. Going back to Sam, it was kind of funny how it sort of put things in perspective for Jon again. He was like, I loved him, but I wanted to hate him at times. And Sam's like, well, sometimes I want to hate you, Jon. You're much better at me than me at fighting and girls.
Except
and
for
all this
reading.
Stuff. Yeah. In that case, I bet Sam's miles better. Like you said last episode. So that was just kind of funny, seeing everything put into perspective in that way by Sam, and Jon sort of has a realization again of like his place in the world and at the wall, and the way people perceive him versus the way that he perceives himself and everything like that. So he's learning and just becoming a better person every step of the way.
Yeah, and just to keep going through this scene, I like when Sam says, okay, they're ready for you, and Jon... it cuts over to the next scene, and Jon is facing the Night's Watch Council, I guess I'll call them. I don't know if they have a specific name, but all the men up there, minus Maester Aemon, are the ones that end up killing Jon.
True.
So he's up there answering to the men that end up killing him.
Is this our first time seeing Janos Slynt up at the wall?
Yes.
Oh, I hate that guy.
Oh, I hate that guy.
It's so bad.
And I love when he goes, the boy must die. And Maester Aemon goes, if we beheaded every ranger who lay with a girl, the wall would be manned by headless men.
Yep.
And I thought that was very telling.
Ageless wisdom from Maester Aemon.
Yeah. And then, Janos is kind of giving him shit about being a wildling. He's like, I fought with the wildlings, I ate with the wildlings, I laid with a wildling girl. And, Janos is just being that pompous ass that he is.
A bastard son of a traitor.
Yeah,
what would you expect?
And so I love Jon's response to Janos. And he says, well, have you ever been beyond the wall, sir? Like, yeah. You don't even know what you're talking about. You literally just got here. And And then Janos says, like, I was the,
I commanded the city watch of King's Landing, boy.
And he goes, and now you're here. You must not have been very good at your job. And I love that, like, because he's just
reprehensible.
I don't know. He's just, oh my God. Janos is, he's just annoying. I love the way Jon tells Mance's plan. It shows that he really was the whole time. Because I always like to watch these rewatches. I think I've said this before, as if I was watching it as a first-time viewer, but with the knowledge of knowing what happens before and after. And when Jon kills Qhorin Halfhand and starts his relationship with Ingrid, as a first-time viewer, there is some times in those scenes that you think maybe Jon has really gone to the dark side. And I feel like in this scene, Jon basically laying out all of Mance's strategy to the Night's Watch solidifies that everything he was doing beyond the wall with the wildlings was for the benefit of the Night's Watch.
Was for this moment, to get this intel back to them.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty
and
crazy.
And then he says, do you intend to execute me? And he's saying this to the three men that end up,
executing him. Assassinating him. More like,
and then my last point on this is, when Aemon says, the boy was telling the truth, and he goes, well, how would you possess such magic? And he goes, it's, simple. I grew up in King's Landing.
Yup. And that was a cool line too, because that's our sort of the viewer of the TV show. It's like their first hint at who Aemon Targaryen was, We don't know that he's a Targaryen at this point, but the fact that he grew up in King's Landing makes us wonder, like, oh, who is this guy?
Wait, are you sure we don't know? I think we know. I think we know.
Oh, do we?
I think we do. I think that, because in that conversation with Jon happened back when, around when Sam first arrived.
Right. You're right. Yeah, because they're talking about, it's right when he wants to flee the wall to go help Robb in the war.
Yes.
And Aemon's like, I've had to deal with, I've had to live with horrible things happening to my family, and I didn't abandon my post, basically.
Yes.
He's like, wait, who are you? And that's when he goes into the whole, Aemon Targaryen thing.
Yeah,
turning down the crown.
My father was so-and-so, and...
Yeah, it's crazy.
I forget the whole, lineage.
Yeah.
I loved that. Total sidebar. I loved that. Did you post that family tree of the Targaryens on Game of Microphones, or did I see that somewhere else?
I posted that. George R.R. Martin had posted it, and it's like something from the upcoming Fire and Blood book, and it's like a big Targaryen lineage thing. Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's creepy though how all the lines are connected.
Right. It's all like
brothers
incest.
and sisters, and yeah. Oh, it's funny. So yeah, there's a lot of other stuff to break down in this scene too. It's good to see Jon healed for one. Last we saw him, obviously he was stuck full of arrows. So that's one way of determining a little time has passed. Jon clarifies that he didn't murder Qhorin Halfhand, but that he wanted him to kill him, to infiltrate, basically, to prove he was to prove that he was worthy of joining the wildlings, like Mance, essentially. So Alistair says, don't talk about Qhorin like you knew him. He was my brother. And Jon says to him, well, then you'd know he would do anything to protect the wall. And Alistair's like, oh, damn it. Yeah, you're right.
Totally shut him down.
Mm-hmm. That was pretty funny. Great comeback. And like Jon's fighting style has been influenced by the wildlings. His philosophy is also starting to be influenced as well, as you can tell by him referring to the wildlings, not as the wildlings, but the free folk.
Yes.
And listen to him. He even talks like a wildling now. And that's what he goes into. I talk like a wildling. I ate with the wildlings, climbed the wall with the wildlings, etc. So that's cool. You can he's starting to approach that perspective that Sam has gained by his bond with Gilly, Jon's bond with Ygritte and with Tormund and his other friends from up there, he's starting to realize that they're men too, that they are the realms of men. The Seven Kingdoms are a realm, the North is a realm. They're all men.
Yeah, it's a fight against the living and the dead, and this is kind of the start of his story arc with, coming into the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, going and getting the wildlings from Hardhome and letting them through the wall. This is kind of the start of that. I feel he's starting to find his purpose other than being a man of the Night's Watch. He's finding a bigger purpose in kind of a parallel way, the way that Dany did, like we talked about last episode.
Yep.
This is starting his arc of his purpose. His
ideology, and more, instead of just being a military leader, being an ideological icon,
Absolutely. It's, the start of his journey to basically convince people that stop fighting each other. This is stupid. We have a huge threat on the horizon. We need to band together as the living because the dead are coming. This is when that story arc for Jon, I think, kind of starts this episode.
Yep, and it's not there yet. Not quite there yet. But speaking of huge threats on the horizon, Maester Aemon was informed by Sam last week that the White Walkers were coming, and he sent out all those ravens. And so if that wasn't bad enough, this week, Jon is informing everybody that Mance Rayder is marching on the wall with 100,000 wildlings.
I know.
Impossible, He's united the Thens, the Hornfoots, the Ice River clans. He has giants fighting for him.
And I love that Janos totally writes that off.
Yeah, he's like, giants, that's bullshit. It's sort of like the way that Tyrion writes off Grumpkins and Snarks in season 1 when they're heading up to the wall as well.
Totally, that's so true.
But until you're beyond the wall, you don't even know, Like he tells to Janos, have you ever been beyond the wall? Like you were saying, so that's pretty crazy.
Well, and it also foreshadows Janos when the wildlings do attack. That
Too
Janos
bad he didn't get eaten by a giant. That would have been cool.
I know. He has a total mental breakdown when he sees the giants.
Oh yeah, he did get to see them. He saw them. Yeah.
And that's when he goes and hides in the kitchen with Gilly
like
and soils himself.
Yep, soils himself. Big time. That's so funny. What a loser. He talks a big game, but obviously he's
a total pussy.
Yeah, total pussy. So we're learning about these massive threats. There's the revelation that not only do giants exist, but they're on the way to crush us, which is hilarious. Jon goes on to talk about how there's a band of wildlings that are already south of the wall, led by Tormund Giantsbane, and how he killed their warg and 3 others. They're the ones that shot him full of arrows. And their orders are to attack Castle Black from the south when Mance hits from the north. And this is an interesting plan, which you can tell is laid out by Mance, because it's very strategic, with his knowledge of the Night's Watch and of Castle Black. He knows that Castle Black was designed with no southern wall, specifically so that it could not be defended from attacks from the south, which seems crazy, but it's actually kind of a smart design plan. So I have some information about why that is as well.
Oh, cool.
The basically what happened was that the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch ended up declaring himself a king and rebelling against the kingdoms. So I can't remember which king it was, but he rode north to basically take back the Night's Watch and eliminate the 13th Lord Commander. So I have a little excerpt from a wiki of Ice and Fire again to give a little more detail about that. After the defeat of the 13th Lord Commander, the rule was enforced that castles of the Night's Watch along the wall should never be fortified against approach from the south. so that they cannot oppose the lands south of the wall which they are meant to defend. The downfall of the 13th Lord Commander, also resulted in the strict enforcement of the rule that the Night's Watch is meant to be politically neutral as guardians who do not rule the wall, but who serve the realms of men. They'll take no wives, they'll wear no crowns. This could all largely be a result of this rebellion of the 13th Lord Commander, who took a wife and rebelled against the kingdoms. So it's kind of interesting that they're vulnerable from the south, and Mance takes advantage of this by creating a massive fire to distract the Night's Watch from the north, while he has teams sneak in from the south to attack unguarded, basically.
Yeah, and I also don't really think that Mance or Tormund really believed that there were 1,000 men at Castle Black.
Yeah, probably.
I think
Mance would know.
I mean, Jon is a pretty noble guy. I mean, he's a Stark. For him to tell a lie, it's probably very uncomfortable for him. And I would think that they would pick up on that.
Yeah, probably. I mean, what, even was it George Washington told a lie about the cherry tree or something? Was that him, or was that Abraham Lincoln, or I can't remember?
No, it was George Washington.
Yeah, so even he told a lie at one point. So
yeah, no, but that's very interesting about the wall or the castles not being banned from the south, because it completely prevents, a king being declared in the Night's Watch. I like that. I love a wiki of Ice and Fire.
Yeah,
they have so much good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to add about that scene?
No, that's my number 4. So what's your number 4?
My number 4. A girl has a sword. As opposed to a girl has no name. So, of course, Arya gets her sword back this episode. Needle. So
yes.
A girl has a sword. What just an awesome scene with her and the Hound as they come upon this tavern, right? They're riding along, and Arya wants a horse, and she's asking about,
what little girl doesn't want a pony?
Right. Yeah,
give her some credit.
That's so funny. The Hound's kind of laughing at her about it, and we find out that he didn't steal anything from Joffrey before he left. And he says, I'm not a thief. Arya says to him, "You're fine with murdering little boys, but thieving is beneath you." And he says,
"A man's got to have a code."
Yep. Great line where he was following orders from the king. He wouldn't have just killed the kid, so he had to obey his orders. But he's not a thief. So that's kind of cool. A little depth for Sandor there. It makes you wonder, because we don't really know too much about him yet at this point.
No, this is actually my number 2. And I labeled it, "What the fuck, salami?"
Nice. Yeah.
So I'll plug in where I can.
Sounds good. So they come upon this tavern, and they're hiding in the bushes, creeper style. And Arya sees Polliver come out, and she sees Needle. What are the odds? There's the whole 7 kingdoms, but they happen upon this spot. It's destiny calling that she needs this sword back. They want food, right? So they're showing up there, and Arya's like, "I'm hungry," and "You're hungry," and the Hound says, 5 horses, 5 men, more than I feel like killing on an empty stomach," which is another great line. And that's when Polliver walks out, and so she's like, "He killed Lami," and that's when your line pops up.
"What the fuck, salami?" Just every time, yeah. I just burst out laughing.
What the fuck, salami? Yeah, so good. So he was my friend. Polliver stole my sword and put it right through his neck. He still got it. As she sees her sword, and Hound's like, "Got what?"
Oh, and that desperation on her face, that desire, you can feel it in her eyes. Maisie Williams has the most expressive eyes.
She really does. She has some huge eyes.
Big, beautiful brown eyes with those eyebrows, and it's she uses them in her acting, because you can feel that
they widen,
want, that desire. I am getting that sword.
Yeah.
And with determination, she starts walking down there. She's like, I'm taking it back. And
Yeah.
the Hound is like, get back here.
And it's sort of like the last episode when she just jumps off the horse and goes over to kill that guy that's eating with the phrase.
Exactly.
She sort of just, the Hound's still talking and he realizes that she's not even standing in the bushes anymore. She's already like almost at the front door.
She has her own agenda. I mean, it's...
And he's just going to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and I do like in this scene though that Arya kind of surrenders to the fact that she does need the Hound at this point. She's
That's
like,
true.
I have nobody. My mom's dead, my dad's dead. I don't know where my sister is. Like, because when she's asking for the pony, she's like, "What do you think? I'm gonna run off? Like, where am I gonna go?" She kind of surrenders that thought of.
She's like, "You're killing my stragglers. Like, I need you to help." Finish off all these crowds.
Yeah, you're protecting me. And so I kind of liked that. I wouldn't say it was a soft moment, but it was definitely a moment into her thought process of becoming more accepting of the fact that her and the Hound are going to be together for a while.
Yeah. And so before Arya actually walks to the building, there's another moment that we can't skip over, which is really good, which we already referenced slightly. The Hound says, she says, he's still got it. And the Hound says, got what? My sword, Needle. Needle. Of course you named your sword. Lots of people name their swords. Lots of cunts. Just such a classic moment,
It's so perfect. It's so the Hound.
He hates that shit. Yeah. So funny. One of my favorite conversations from the whole show. So every once in a while you get some real gems with dialogue here, like George R.R. Martin has just these moments of brilliance, which is great. So Arya rushes off towards the tavern, and the Hound catches her, and he's like, get back here, and she's, my brother gave me that sword, and he kind of like steps in between her and the building, and he like really pushes her back, and he's like, I don't care if he ate your friend, we're not going in there. Right as the door opens. And it's also funny, I don't care if he ate your friend, because in the same episode we get the Thens introduced, who are cannibals and are like probably would have eaten her friend. The marbling is amazing on these southerners.
You really should try.
Yeah, try crow. So the door opens behind the Hound, and it's this shrimpy little guy compared to Sandor, and Sandor turns around and basically has to go in at this point, otherwise it would be weird. So he walks in, and you can tell right off the bat these guys are all real winners as they sexually assault a tavern wench over in the corner there.
Yeah.
Which is fucked up.
In front of her dad.
Yeah, super. These guys are winners, big time. So we definitely right off the bat, we don't want Sandor to kill them. Like we're not going to be disappointed when Sandor kills all these bastards, basically.
No.
So they go over, and this whole scene is amazing. Obviously, Sandor is recognizable with his burned half face and his just monstrous size. So Polliver recognizes him right off the bat. I know you. You're the Hound. Pour our new friend some ale. And he's like trying to play it friendly, at least to start. He's talking about how he's been stuck with Gregor, your brother, meaning no offense, none taken. And he's talking about how the Mountain's like great at what he does, but it's just torture. You spend enough time putting the hammer to people, you start feeling like a carpenter. It drains the fun right out of it. And what's life without a little fun? And Arya's just like, like this guy's so gross.
You're disgusting.
Yeah, and the Hound is just like, as well. You can tell he doesn't want to fucking deal with this guy. So what's life without a little fun? And he's like, I don't need to tell you that, huh? And like sort of looks at Arya. And so Hound plays along and basically pretends like he's been raping Arya, which is fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's all right. I've had better, and it's like, whoa. And I don't even know if Arya understands what's going on at that point. But
yeah, she's just like trying to figure out how, I think in that point she doesn't really even care what they're talking about. She's
just trying to figure out how to get Needle.
In her mind, how am I going to get Needle back?
Yeah, she sees it. It's right there. Like, it's just as close as Rob and her mom were the last episode, where she could like reach out and touch it. She could reach out and touch Needle at that moment. So then that's when stuff starts to get sort of tense between Polliver and the Hound. He's like, you know what, you should come with us. You know, there's always something hidden away for us to find. And these are the king's colors, so nobody stands in his way. That means nobody stands in our way. You know, gold, silver, daughters, anything we want. And and Sandor responds, "Fuck the king." Which
my favorite line of his.
Yeah,
when he says it now and when he says it at the Battle of the Blackwater.
Fuck water, bring me wine. And so the camera cuts to Arya, and she's smiling, you know. She's like, "Fuck the king, fuck Joffrey." And she grins.
I know, and her bright little eyes are just glimmering, they're glittering with that. She's just like, haha.
And so Polliver is like, you know, when I heard that Joffrey's dog abandoned the Battle of Blackwater, I didn't believe it, but here you are. And he's like, here I am. Bring me one of those chickens. You know, they sort of like start arguing over the chickens. And he's like, well, how about we trade, you know, one of our chickens for one of your little chickens? And like looks at Arya, and the Hound is it's even gross, like even worse too. He's like, Lowell over there likes him a bit broken in, you know, and the guy's like, like kind of waves, you know, it's so fucked up. And that's the Hound's next epic line of the moment. You're a talker. Listening to talkers makes me thirsty. And he fucking reaches across the table.
Just chugs
Polliver's beer. And at that moment, you know, and the cool thing too, he's chugging his beer, but he's doing it with his head like cocked to the side, so he maintains eye contact with him like basically the whole time in case Polliver tries to do anything.
Yeah, he's giving him the middle finger with his eyes.
and just keeping an eye on him in case he decides to like attack, right? So
that's true too.
Even like the brazenness of this move, like taking somebody's beer, you know, at a bar, basically, that's next level. You do that, you're basically saying, fight me, you know?
You're getting in a fight.
So Arya, even, it cuts to her eyes, and she's no longer smiling, grinning, like after the fuck the king line. She's like, whoa, like her eyes are all wide at this point. She's like, shit is about to go down. And he's like, and hungry. Think I'll take 2 chickens, right? And at this point, Polliver looks back to his comrades, and they're all like wide-eyed and visibly nervous at this point too. And for some reason, Polliver still tries to act tough. He's like, you don't seem to understand the situation, you know? And he's like, I understand that if any more words come pouring out of your cunt mouth, I'm gonna have to eat every fucking chicken in this room. Yeah, that's just another great line. Obviously, eating every fucking chicken in this room, he's not actually talking about eating every chicken in this room. He's like, I'm going to have to kill every one of you.
Exactly.
You know, so it's like a beautiful double entendre. So, you've lived your life for the king. You're going to die for some chickens? Someone is.
You
know, and that's when Polliver pulls out his sword and the Hound tips the whole table. Like he raises it a notch. He's like, oh, you take your sword, I'm just gonna throw this fucking table at you. So he throws the whole table at him, knocks him over, a scuffle ensues, everybody's going crazy, the Hound's just like slashing and beating people to a pulp. He stabs a guy in the crotch with something in the guy.
Oh, that was so brutal.
The guy's like, you know. And some guy gets on top of the Hound and tries to cut his throat. And this is, to me, it's like, you know, like how little kids will be like playing and like a bully will like grab your hand and like smack it against your own face and be like, stop hitting yourself. While he's like making you hit yourself. That sort of happens with this. It's like a grown-up version or like a Westeros version where he turns the guy's...
I have a hard time watching that
I love
part
it.
Of that scene.
It's so great.
Like, you
so
see it coming,
brutal.
you're like, no.
Yeah. The blade slowly turns from the Hound's neck. And you can see the guy watching the blade, and his eyes get more and more wild as he realizes that his strength is very outmanned by Sandor's strength. And the blade turns towards his own face and steadies itself, and then the Hound, who's holding onto his head, just slams it down on the blade 2 or 3 times. And the guys...
And the sound effects in that scene, too, it's just like...
Yeah, and on top of the sound effects, the guy's acting performance as he gets, as he stabs himself in the face, basically. The first one's kind of like a low groan. Ah! And the second one's like, ah! like you really like see screeches on the second impact, and it's like really, really messed up. Like people were traumatized by the Sansa rape scene because of the sounds. Like you didn't really see her being raped, but like you heard her whimpering and crying. And I feel like even like this is sort of similar, even though you see him being stabbed in the face by the knife, his vocal performances, like you close your eyes so you don't have to watch it, and it may even be worse because of his wails. It's just like pathetic whimpering.
Because
like,
I don't really watch that part very often.
Maybe
I
more
watched
impactful.
it today for the rewatch, so you're welcome. I usually don't, though. I usually like pretend to be doing something else, like check my emails.
Right.
I'm like, now's a good time to check my Facebook feed.
Just scroll randomly through anything so I don't have to watch this. So yeah, that's a classic moment. Stop hitting yourself. Stop stabbing yourself. Stop stabbing yourself. You know. And then, oh man, the guy, he like rolls the guy off of him, and as the Hound is sort of getting up and collecting himself, Polliver starts crawling back over to his sword, because the Hound had like really decked Polliver in the face and like knocked him out pretty hard a minute beforehand. So Arya sees him, Polliver, starting to crawl, like regain consciousness and crawl back over to his sword, and she takes quick action. So it's about time to add a second and third man to Arya's kill list. You know? Yes. So she grabs a dead guy's sword and sticks it right through this guy who's lying on the ground trying to get up, killing a second guy. And then she slices the tendons on the back of Polliver's legs, like severs his ACLs or whatever. He drops instantly onto his knees, and like clockwork, she just reaches right around him and draws needle from his belt. A girl has a sword, you know?
Well, and I love that she goes for his legs first, because it's even more justice for Lami, because his leg was injured. That's why he couldn't walk. That's why he was asking Polliver for help.
Right.
So she like whacks him across the legs.
Yep.
And then her famous line.
Yeah, he's on his back, and like you were saying, her first thing that she says to him is, "Something wrong with your leg, boy?" And yeah, his legs are fucked up, like she just cut him. So that at first that question like sort of makes sense, but it's still kind of weird the way she says it.
It confuses him. I don't think he's like understanding like what the hell? Yeah, of course my leg hurts.
Oh yeah, at this point he doesn't make the connection yet. He just knows that, like, yeah, like something's wrong with my leg, but why are you calling me boy? You know, like something's weird about this question. So he's like, what? What do you mean? And, you know, can you walk? Have I got to carry you? Carry me? Fine little blade. And he's like, still doesn't know what's going on. And then he's like holding up his hands like, don't kill me. Because at this point it's like stuck to his neck, right? And she looks him right in the eye. Maybe I'll pick my teeth with it. And he's like, oh my God,
I love it.
I said that. And right as his eyes widen and he realizes that this is the girl and he thinks it's impossible, that's when she just slides it right up through his throat.
And his death took a while, too. It was like,
yeah. And if you look closely, you can see needle pop out the back of his head.
Yes, I love that. Wild.
And then as Arya watches the blood pool from Polliver's mouth and watching him gurgle and everything, it cuts to her and she's smiling. And she is twisted, man. Like, she is enjoying this.
She is pretty twisted. I mean, and it's just another name off her list. It's like, check, on to the next.
Yep. And this is easily one of my favorite scenes of the entire show. And it's so cool how she remembers that moment where he killed Lami so vividly that she repeats all the lines to him. And only right before he dies does he realize what's happening, basically. Very well done. And then they ride off. Hound's munching on some chicken. Arya is smiling.
And she has her pony.
Oh, she's got her... She's got a horse. She's got needle on her belt. Hound's got his chicken. And everybody's happy.
Everyone's happy.
That's great. And she has the pony, too. I didn't even, realize that. That's so funny.
I'm a horse girl, so of course I...
True. And hopefully that tavern wench never got raped.
I don't think so, because most of those guys were dead, and her dad ran up the stairs.
As long as she wasn't raped before they got there, before the Hound and Arya got there, then she was basically saved. So
I don't think she was. I don't think she was, because she was still fully clothed.
Yep. And the guy was pleading with them too, so it's like nothing had really happened yet. So thank you, the Hound, for being a champion of women. Yes, for sure. We never see the Hound really do anything bad to a woman.
No, I mean, he tries to just, I feel like he's the barometer of like the knights and the kind of brotherhood that goes along with that, because of the way he feels about his brother. Yeah, so I think he tries to do kind of everything that a knight is really purposed to do. Be noble and act with honor and protect people. And, while many knights do that, it's almost like a fraternity, like there's
definitely
there's good and bad things when you're knighted, and he tries to just uphold the good.
Yep, when he can. When he doesn't have a ruthless king telling him what to do. Tell him to slaughter little boys and shit.
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, it
wasn't up to him. It was out of his hands.
Yeah, I mean, he can't disobey his king.
Right, otherwise he's a dead man.
Yeah.
So, when he's not being forced to do other people's evil bidding, he really does try to be a noble person. Pretty badass. So that pretty much wraps up my number 4. A girl has her sword, finally. And anything else you want to add about that?
No, I think we covered that scene pretty well. It's a great scene. It's a really good one.
So how about your number 3?
So my number 3 is The Viper.
Nice. Same with me. I titled it
Awesome.
A Dornishman Pays His Debts.
Awesome. Okay. So we meet Oberyn Martell this episode, and I want to rewind just before we meet Oberyn, when Tyrion is kind of boasting about his, amazing
diplomatic skills
and
rock climbing skills, hunting skills, diplomatic
Napoleon
skills.
Dynamite. Any scene with Bronn and Tyrion. I love their banter while they're waiting outside for what they are assuming is Prince Doran.
How many Dornishmen does it take to fuck a goat? Please don't.
Just knock it off, Bronn. Like, we should be waiting in a tavern so we can drink while we wait for the party. It's like, this is the Prince of Dorne we're waiting for, dude. We're not going to, be in a tavern, drunk off our asses waiting for the prince.
Yep. I love Bronn, man. He's the fucking best.
He's the best.
He's so
I want to party with Bronn.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it's really funny that Pod, he's such a nerd. He knows all the Dornish houses, and what a quirky character he is.
He's like Glyvin. Yeah, it's so funny.
But I love when Tyrion gets snubbed and they find out Prince Doran is not coming, but Oberyn is there in his place, and you can just kind of see the look on Tyrion's face, like, oh shit. Oberyn is in King's Landing. He arrived before dawn. We need to go find him before he kills somebody.
Yeah, and he mentions that there was, been a conflict between the Martells of Dorne and the Lannisters of Casterly Rock, which has been, this conflict has been around for years. And obviously, this animosity is largely a result of the Mountain having killed Oberyn's sister, Elia, the princess and wife of the Targaryen prince Rhaegar, son of the Mad King, and her children, young Aegon and Rhaenys, I believe.
Yes.
Oh, it's so brutal.
Yeah, so of course we meet Oberyn in a whorehouse with his paramour.
Yep. And that shows how smart Tyrion is again, because he just immediately knows where to look for him. He's like, well, if I were arriving in the city and blah, 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 I'd be looking for a whore, basically,
Yeah,
if you're known as
absolutely.
being a killer and a horror monger, basically, like that's what you're going to be doing.
Right. So I love when he, is talking to Ilaria about like the horrors that they're gonna pick out, and he goes to the guy, he's like, and you're staying, he goes, I'm not an offer, and he goes, everyone who works for Littlefinger is an offer. Like, what are you talking about?
Well,
like,
I'm wildly expensive.
Have you ever been with a prince?
It's also cool, that scene, because you immediately get to see the dynamic between Oberyn and Ilaria, and how it differs between the way like that women are treated in other parts of Westeros. Obviously, they're basically on equal footing here. Ilaria is making decisions. He's asking her for input on what they should do. She takes part in the same type of promiscuity that he does. They're like equals in their relationship, which is kind of interesting to note. Strong female character who's recognized as such by her partner. It's not something that's super common around Westeros. Women don't necessarily always get to make decisions.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, she's definitely an equal and respected, I would say is the best word. You can tell that he really loves her, that they have, and I love her when that Oliver, I think his name is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Oliver, yeah.
Oliver. She goes, he goes, my lady, and she's like, let's just keep it real here. I'm a bastard. She's a whore. Like, let's just call it how it is. I just kind of loved that.
A term of courtesy in this establishment, lady. A lie anywhere.
Yeah. It's like, dude, you're in a whorehouse. You're in a whorehouse.
Yeah, it reminded me of that time with Stannis when he's writing the letter about Joffrey being a bastard, and after the death of Robert, and the person who's actually the scribe is like reading off what he has, and he's like, his beloved brother Robert, and he's like, I had no love towards Robert, and he's like, well, it's just a harmless courtesy, a lie, take it out. So same thing here, a term of courtesy in this establishment, a lie anywhere,
It's so true. So then, they're about ready to get it on, and then he hears the ominous Rains of Castamere. And my favorite part is when Oberyn gets up and Ilaria is like, Oberyn, don't. And she gets up to follow him, and the whores are looking at each other like
what the hell is
going
happening?
on?
Yeah, and obviously these two Lannister guys are singing the song because the Dornishman is here, or something.
Yes,
like they seem to be trying to agitate him. Well, they know who he is because they're like, we don't see any Dornishmen here in the capital. Like,
but I think they realize he's from Dorne when they see him. I don't think they're aware.
True, because they wouldn't necessarily have any reason to instigate anything against him. So yeah, maybe you're right.
No, because nobody knows that Oberyn is there. It's supposed to be Doran, and I'm not sure Doran would go to Littlefinger's whorehouse. He doesn't strike me as that person. Right.
I was just thinking that I'd thought that maybe word of Oberyn's arrival had spread throughout the whorehouse, so those guys may have heard it.
Maybe.
Like,
I don't know, though. They were I think they were just serenading their whores.
Oh yeah, that makes sense, because they're Lannisters, so they want to look badass by singing the Rains of Castamere. Like, they're not Lannisters,
but they're like low level,
they're henchmen.
Yes,
so they're like, we're in with the big guys. We're gonna sing this song to show you that we're part of the power structure. So yeah, maybe you're probably right.
So, and then the whole scene where they are just kind of bantering back and forth, and oh God, when Oberyn stabs him in the wrist and he goes, a long sword is a bad option in closed quarters.
Yep. Oh, that's so great. And the look on his face too is just like this maniacal look, and his face is just like perfect for this moment.
He's very calm and poised and talking with there's a lot of veins in the wrist, and he's just sitting there looking at him like, you're an idiot.
You can tell he's having a lot of fun, and he looks super dangerous.
Yes.
Which is on display also, and when he first enters the room, he walks in and like sort of slowly puts his hand over a flame, and it's like a hint, you're playing with fire here. You know?
Right? Oh, that's so true.
Also showing that he like doesn't give a fuck.
That's very true. I didn't even catch that. I mean, I know he puts his hand over the candle, but that's a great, kind of subtle hint. And then, of course, in walks Tyrion right as he pulls the the blade out.
Spurt, blood shooting everywhere, and Tyrion's like, kind of like, what is happening here?
What is happening? Yeah. So, I think it's great because there's a lot of parallels between Oberyn and Tyrion. I mean, they're both the second sons.
Yeah.
They're both, not in succession for the throne. And I love their dialogue outside the brothel because Oberyn mentions that Rhaegar left his sister for another woman that started a war.
Right.
And I mean, that's a huge foreshadow that obviously Rhaegar left his sister for Lyanna Stark.
Yep.
And it started a war. So clearly, maybe Prince Oberyn knows more than most of the other houses about that situation.
Maybe.
Because
it was known that he had at least captured Lyanna, and people had thought that she was kidnapped, but Oberyn seems to think that Rhaegar had left
her.
Yeah.
Yes.
Elia for Lyanna. So he seems to have a more romantic interpretation of the situation as opposed to all of us who are told repeatedly that Lyanna was kidnapped and raped by Rhaegar.
Yes, so I think he obviously knows a little more than the rest of Westeros. And I do love that he mentions that Tywin was the one that kind of ended the war back here at King's Landing, because it goes back to just this previous episode when Joffrey's like trying to go toe-to-toe with Tywin and says that he's been hiding under Casterly Rock and my father won the real war. He killed Prince Rhaegar. It was actually Tywin that ended the war.
True.
I mean, Robert might have killed Rhaegar, but Tywin was the one that put the war to end. So I thought that was kind of a nice coup after Joffrey's, 16-year-old tantrum that he was having.
He's like, actually,
in the previous
little boy, I sacked King's Landing. Robert won a battle at the Trident, but I took the throne.
Yeah, absolutely. And then his line, the Lannisters aren't the only ones who pay their debts.
Yeah, not even pretending like that's an open threat. He's like, tell your
father
I'm here. Yeah,
yeah, I'm here.
There's some other funny moments to cover from this scene as well. Like he tells Oliver, take off your clothes. We'll be here for a while. And Oliver's like, which way do you like it? He's like, my way. So I think it's safe to say that Oberyn is the Dom in this situation.
Oh, for sure.
Which is hilarious.
Well, that Oliver guy is definitely not the Dom in anything.
He's the sub for sure. So when he walks into the Lannisters singing, one of them's like, you lost, friend? And that sort of signifies that they don't know who he is as well. I don't see many Lannisters where I'm from. We don't see many Dornishmen in the capital. And he's like, we don't like the smell of the capital, which is hilarious because King's Landing is known for its wretched smell, which can apparently be experienced even from a distance. And that reminds me of the Great Stink of 1858. Have you ever heard of that before?
No.
So the Great Stink of 1858 occurred in England. And basically, up until that point, there was no such thing as sewers or like drainage systems for waste. So people would just be dumping out their night pails, like in Flea Bottom, and the shit would be running past whatever street it was. So apparently, one summer was like pretty hot in England, and the whole country just like stunk to the point where it was known as the Great Stink of 1858, and it resulted in the creation of sewer systems. Like they were like, we have to deal with this.
Well, isn't that a good thing?
Yeah. Like we have to deal with this once and for all.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, so that's pretty funny, and I always end up thinking about it somehow. The Great Stink of 1858. Look it up. So Ilaria comes in to try to talk down Oberyn, and they're like, why are you wasting a woman like this on a Dornishman? Bring him a shaved goat and a bottle of olive oil. You know? And I'm like, oh, you just fucked up so bad. Some great dialogue here. You know why all the world hates a Lannister? You think your gold and your lions and your golden lions make you better than everyone. But can I tell you a secret? You're not a golden lion. You're just a pink little man who's far too slow on the draw. And it takes a second for that to sink in for the other guy. He just slapped him with the glove across the face. You know what I mean? That's
for sure.
That's saying, draw your sword, punk. Like, it's time to go.
And it totally echoes, why am I blanking on his name? The guy that chops off Jaime's hand.
Vargo Hoat, or in the show, sorry, Locke.
Oh my God, why did we were both like,
yeah,
what the heck? It kind of reminds me of when what Locke says to Jaime about, like, you think you can hide behind your father. You know, it's a very similar sentiment. So clearly this feeling about the Lannisters spreads from the north down to the south.
Oh yeah, people don't like the Lannisters, generally speaking, which is, you know, Jaime's widely renowned as like a scumbag. Nobody likes Cersei who's ever met her, that type of thing. So he tells the guy basically, draw your sword, bitch. And it takes the guy a second, but as soon as he reaches for his sword on the table, Oberyn just whack, pins his wrist to the table. So he basically, Oberyn is known for his speed in combat and his like legendary fighting capability. So this is a moment where we get to see his legendary speed on full display as he taunts this guy and then pins the guy's wrist to the table lightning fast with his dagger. He actually lets the guy make the first move and reach for his sword, and then he grabs his dagger and jams it into his wrist so fast that the guy can't even react.
Totally.
It's amazing. And so the other guy sort of reaches for his own sword at his scabbard, and longsword is a bad option in close quarters. When I pull my blade, your friend starts bleeding. Quite a lot, I'm afraid. So many veins in the wrist. That's when he gets that look on his face, and he basically, you know, gives him an option. He says, he'll live if you get him help straight away.
So, decisions.
That's another great line there. Decisions. I'm laughing my ass off. And that's when Tyrion walks in and he pulls the blade, and the guy is like, he sort of grabs his friend and runs out. And for all we know, that guy died, because a lot of cutting the wrist like that is known as a method. Yeah.
He's likely to have died. Yeah. I mean, to survive that with an artery, if he nicked the artery, which it looks like he went straight through the wrist, so I'm assuming he did.
Yeah.
And the way it squirted out.
Out. That was a lot of blood. Yeah. Ugh. So Tyrion meets Oberyn, and you can right off the bat, it doesn't seem like Oberyn hates Tyrion as much as the other Lannisters. And we get to learn about why he has a soft spot for Tyrion in the future. Remember when he talks about visiting Casterly Rock and hearing about this ugly, twisted monster, and when he's just a little baby and Cersei's like pinching his cock and making him cry and stuff.
Wait, that's not this episode though, is
no,
it?
That's just in the future.
I was like, did I miss that?
But it's like a pre-reflection of that story, as he seems like more warm towards Tyrion. He invites Tyrion and the Hound to join them in an orgy, basically, and says, "We'll need more girls in here." You know, Bronn seems like totally cool with that.
Bronn's shaking his head like, yeah.
Yeah. And Bronn has a couple other great lines here. He's like, what does he say to him? And what are you, his hired killer? It started that way, aye. Now I'm a knight. How did that come to pass? killed the right people, I suppose. So he's got a great few lines here. The killing the right people line, the how many Dornishmen does it take to fuck a goat line, and then his line about Tyrion's diplomacy. That was some high quality diplomacy there, Tyrion. After they just sort of brush past him, almost running him over with a horse.
As he's still talking.
Yeah, he's trailing off.
You must be wary from all your travels.
Must be wary from all your travels. As they slam past him. So it's great. Yeah, I picked up on that reference too about how Oberyn refers to them both as being second sons.
Yeah, which is funny because we just what was the second son? Second
2
Sons
episodes
was last.
Ago.
2 episodes ago, that's right.
Yeah, we got the introduction of the sellsword group, Second Sons, and there's lots of Second Sons in this episode as well. Tyrion, Oberyn, the Hound, Jon.
Oh, that's very
kind
true.
Of,
yeah,
kind of
that
not
is
really.
True.
I guess Jon would be Rhaegar's second son, right?
And he's, I mean, if we were to think of him as Ned's too,
yeah, then he'd be second to Robb.
He's second to Robb.
That's how it's like, kind of.
Kind of, but
kind
yeah,
of
I mean, he is
Rhaegar's
Rhaegar's second son for sure.
Yeah. So Oberyn goes over the whole story about his sister being, murdered by Gregor Clegane and how he raped her and split her in half with his greatsword and how the babies were killed, and the whole time where he started talking about that, Tyrion is just like, his eyes are just fixed on the ground and he's visibly uncomfortable by this conversation, and you can tell he feels ashamed by it and sympathizes with Oberyn to some extent, and Oberyn feels comfortable enough with him to reach down and touch his chin and lift his face up to make eye contact with him again, and I'm asking you a question, which is.
And I like how Tyrion kind of like bats his hand away, like,
right,
don't do that, because it reminded me of like what an adult does to a child,
right? And he's
like when you want them to look at you, and with the height difference, I think maybe Tyrion had just gotten that a lot in his life, and it was like a disrespect to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. So he goes on to say, if the mountain killed my sister, your father gave the order. Tell your father I'm here. And tell him the Lannisters aren't the only ones who pay their debts. Like he said.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, open threat, not even trying to hide it. Like, I'm here for Tywin, biatch, basically.
Yep.
And a well-deserved threat. Tywin fucked up, basically, when that whole thing happened. He knew that Oberyn was who he was, and he was playing with fire, fucking with Oberyn's family, basically. I'm not sure if he ordered the Mountain to actually kill Elia Martell. That Mountain may have actually just done that on his own.
I would have I mean, I'm not sure like what purpose that served to kill. I mean, sadly, I know
it would be
why,
leaving a regent,
Yeah, I guess so.
Queen regent.
I mean, I know Tywin is pretty cold-blooded, but I have a hard time believing that he would order that. However, though, I mean,
he did wipe out the whole houses of Rain and Tarbeck.
Yeah, and also the Hound is, what we've come to find. What Robb says is a mad dog. He follows orders, so
right.
I mean, I know he goes off on crazy stuff.
You mean not the Hound, the Mountain?
Oh, the Mountain. Yeah, the Mountain is a mad dog, and he goes off and does his own crazy things, but he's obeying Tywin's orders.
Yep.
He's doing it.
I like how Oberyn turns around that famous Lannister saying on Tyrion, a Lannister always pays his debts. He Tyrion said that repeatedly. We've heard so many Lannisters say that, and he sort of spins it on Tyrion here and tells him that Lannisters aren't the only ones. It's a pretty classic moment there. I mean, that pretty much wraps up everything I wanted to say about the introduction of the Red Viper. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it.
Nice. How about your numero dos?
So my numero dos was what the fuck salami. And
right.
We covered that scene pretty detailed.
Yep, for sure. So my number 2 is dragons. And
dragons.
Yeah.
Nice.
Dany lounges with Drogon as Rhaegal and Viserion fly and fight over a dead goat. And the dragons are much bigger at this point, like we mentioned earlier, and more difficult to control as well, as seen by how Drogon lashes out at Dany when she tries to pull him back from fighting for the goat. She's like, "Hey, come on back here!" And he like,
yeah, she's like, "Shh," and he's like,
"Yeah."
I'm like, "Oh my lord!"
Right in her face, and he is menacing looking. Like she's visibly unnerved and shaken by this, and she sort of like stays reclined back even further with like her eyes
frozen,
kind of wide, and sort of looks away like gazing the landscape. And Drogon flaps his wings, and her hair flows for a moment with the gust of wind from his wings. Really well done, because obviously the dragon isn't there, so they just had to time a gust of wind and then add the CGI for the dragon flapping his wings and make him line up.
And the CGI is just so amazing.
Really good here.
I mean, like, when she's just sitting there quietly petting him, and I almost kind of call it like purring like a cat.
Yeah.
Because like his little, I don't even know what to call it, like his scales, like the ribs on the back of they like kind of flutter as he's breathing, and the sounds that he's making. It's
so good.
They truly look like real animals. It's pretty uncanny. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Agreed. So then as Drogon flaps off and flies away, and Drogon, his coloring is the black and red. He just looks so cool too. Jorah approaches. "They're dangerous, Khaleesi. They can never be tamed, not even by their mother." And that's sort of maybe foreshadowing potential danger to Dany from her dragons in the future.
Oh.
Who knows? Like, who knows, man? They could, if like, obviously Viserion is going to be a problem.
That's true.
So yeah, the dragons can turn on anybody. It sort of made me think of when they were arranging for the quote unquote purchase of the Unsullied from Krasny's Monastis, and she hands over the dragon on the chain, and he's like trying to control it, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, sorry, I agreed to give him to you, but yeah, he never really agreed to that, and dragons aren't.
A dragon is not a slave."
Yeah, melting eyeballs and everything.
Dracarys.
Yeah. So this kind of made me a little bit worried for Dany. Like, who knows? Something could go wrong, and a dragon might bite the hand that feeds it. There may be more to that in the books. I don't want to give any spoilers away, or non-spoilers. Maybe nothing happens. You'll just have to read to find out.
Read the books.
Yeah, definitely read them. So then Dany, she's like, where's Dario? And where's Grey Worm? And he's like, gambling, Your Grace. So she walks through her army of Unsullied, past her newly freed people who are still Misa-ing as she walks past. And she comes upon a couple people sitting on the floor holding out some blades. And it's an introduction of a new old character, Dario 2.0. This time played by Michael Huisman, who is also from Orphan Black, which is a great show if you guys haven't seen it. It's about this girl who realizes that she is one of many clones, and she plays like 12 different characters, all with different hairstyles, different accents, different mannerisms and gaits and speech patterns. And Tatiana Maslany, she's an incredible actress. So I remember when I first saw this episode, I was super jealous that he was here, because he gets this actor, Michael Huisman, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his last name, but he gets to act as a love interest for two of my favorite my two favorite women on television during this year.
That's so funny.
Tatiana Maslany and Emilia Clarke, the bastard. So I'm just wishing I'm that guy for a minute there. And so they're both holding out these blades in this contest of valor and strength, which is kind of funny, trying to win the honor of riding by Dany's side on the road to Marine. And she's like,
and I love how she just kind of like scolds him. She's like, this is so stupid.
Yeah. She's like, just because you guys are being idiots, I'm going to give that honor to Ser Jorah. And the last person holding their sword can go find a new queen to fight for. And they both drop them.
Like simultaneously too.
Yeah. And Dario's like, must be frustrating. Grey Worm responds, you are not a smart man, Dario Naharis. And he replies, I'd rather have no brains and two balls, and kind of like points towards Grey Wind's crotch with his Eric. And I'm like, damn, that's a low blow, Dario. That's a low blow.
Totally.
You didn't need to say that. That's pretty ridiculous. People say shit like that too. Varys as well. You know, Tyrion's like talking about how he's cockless and whatnot. And the other dragon moment that I liked is not literally the dragons, but Dany herself as she walks further along and sees that there are these children on crosses at every mile for
163.
163 miles. Oh man, that's so brutal. And she decides, you know, somebody says, I think it's Barristan says, I'll tell our men to ride ahead and bury them. You don't need to see this. And she says, you will do no such thing. I will see each and every one of their faces. And I like how Dany wants to see the truth regardless of its hideousness. And she wants to see each of the victims and feel their pain and connect with these people, these poor slaves to
they're like little girls too. I mean, it's not just slaves, they're like children.
Yeah. It's horrible. Yeah, exactly. So
and she goes, remove her collar before you bury her.
Yep.
Ugh, so horrible.
Yeah, so I like her, like how she's willing to see the truth no matter what, and wants to feel the pain to keep her motivated and on task, and it's just pretty cool. So that pretty much wraps up my number 2. How about your number 1, my lady?
My number 1 was ice.
Ice, right.
Yeah, so we kind of pretty much covered ice in great detail.
And mine was the golden hands of gold, always cold.
I love that the bookends of this episode start with a Stark sword and end with a Stark sword. I think that's pretty much...
Oh, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's the melting down of one era, like, of Ned, and it's the beginning of Arya being kind of that, I don't know, just... revenge, I guess.
It's sort of like that thing where, like, when one door closes, another door opens. We lose one sword, but we found another sword that was lost, you know, type of thing.
And I truly believe that the two swords this episode is referring to is Ice and Needle, even though we do see Ice turned into two swords. Yeah, I think it's really referring to Ice and Needle.
That's cool. I like that interpretation. We'll go with that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, 'cause I'm sure other people out there are like, well, I mean, I think it's the literal, if you're going to look at it from a literal perspective, the two swords are Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail, because that's what Ice is turning into.
But the more poetic way to look at it would be Ice and Needle.
Yeah, and it's like the bookends. I mean, literally, like the first scene that we see, the cold open is Ice, and the last scene we see is Arya getting Needle back.
The last shot is Arya riding away with Needle. So it's like this whole episode is sandwiched in between these two swords, Ice and Needle.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. So that was my number one.
Great. So I'm sure we have a lot of notes to cover as well.
We do.
Nice.
I still have some notes.
You want to start off?
Sure. So I really enjoyed, even though it's a really sad scene for Sansa, I really enjoyed that Tyrion seems to truly be concerned about her welfare.
Yeah, he holds her hand. He tells her, "I swore to protect you." I can't let you starve.
I truly feel that it's a genuine and honest concern that he has. I don't think he was very pleased with his father for killing off his wife's family.
I agree.
For many reasons. The guest right, it's like, I'm not going to rape her, and now you've killed her family. So now you kind of left me no choice.
Yeah, and I think he also just had sort of a respect for a number of Starks. Like he tells, he hilariously tells Sansa in this scene, like, yeah, I admired your mother. She wanted to have me executed, but I admired her. She was a strong woman, and she was fierce when it came to protecting her children.
And I loved when he said, your mother would want you to carry on. She would want you to. I mean, That's like a great sentiment. And I found this was kind of the first, I know Shay has been kind of sort of jealous throughout this, whole marriage to Sansa, but she's starting to become more defiant with her stance. For example, when he said, if I could have a moment with my wife, the other two handmaidens just like scurry off, and she just stands there and stares at him.
Yeah, like, what's
your problem? He's like, what are you doing? Like,
you're blowing your cover.
You need to leave. Yeah, you need to get out of here. And then as Tyrion starts talking to Sansa, she looks back at him and just gives him like this evil look.
Specifically, I think because she sees he's holding her hand.
Yes, and it's also happened after the whole Varys giving her the diamonds, and so she in her mind, get rid of her. Yeah, so that's kind of the start of Shay's betrayal to Tyrion. I think she's always had kind of a jealous streak, but this is kind of the moment where it's propelling.
It's interesting, too. Her betrayal may largely stem from thinking that Tyrion is trying to get rid of her with these diamonds, when Tyrion really had nothing to do with it.
He had no idea.
This false seed has been planted, essentially, by Varys, which she, misinterpreted. There wasn't really anything to suggest that it was Tyrion's idea. Varys had said to her, you're a bad influence on Tyrion, or your presence is a danger, we need to get you out of here. But he never really implied that it was Tyrion telling him to do this.
No, so not at all.
She sort of projected her own thoughts onto this and assumed that it was Tyrion, when it was really Varys trying to manipulate in the background, basically.
And she confronts Tyrion about this, and Tyrion is like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about.
He's like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I truly believe that he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about, or what she's talking about. And
yeah, same here.
I really feel for Sansa in this overall scene, because she's clearly not wanting to eat. She has people telling her, you need to eat.
She won't even eat lemon cakes. She loves lemon cakes.
I know. I wanted a lemon cake. It looks so good. Yeah, me too. But, they sewed my brother's direwolf onto his body, and they threw my mother's body in the river.
After cutting her throat to the bone.
Oh, God, this is horrible. But, and then this scene, the last bullet point I kind of have is when she's pretty much just had enough of people trying to get her to eat. Sansa. And she's just fucking leave me alone. I just want to grieve my family.
Will you pardon me, my lord? I'd like to visit the God's wood.
Oh, yes. Prayer can be helpful during a time like this. She goes, I don't pray anymore. It's the only place I can go where people don't talk to me.
And Tyrion's just fuck, I'm trying so hard here.
I know, he really was.
You just keep shutting me down.
It shows his character so much, though, how much he cares about her well-being and her welfare.
He's got a little body, but a big heart.
Yeah, and, back to the scene where Shay and Tyrion are going, it's like, you know, you have your child bride. He's like, she despises me. I don't love her.
She's like, don't you want me? And he's like, things are a bit tense right now. And she's like, what
Just a
things?
little.
He's like, are you fucking kidding me? My nephew, the king, wants to murder me. My wife hates me because my father murdered her family. Oberyn Martell wants to murder everyone whose name is Lannister, and he just showed up today. So, like, she's completely oblivious to reality.
Right.
And then, like, immediately following that, she's like, you need to relax. And it's like, don't you want to relax? And she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, I fucking told you, you know?
I know, she's so dense.
So dense. Like, she's not even listening to him. She's just, like, so fixated on being potentially, like, betrayed by Tyrion and told to be, you know, moved off and away, that she's not even listening to what he's saying.
No. Or being rational about it. She may be listening, but she's not hearing it.
Right. And that lack of rationality results in her, like, screaming about all this, basically, and which is not good because Cersei's go-to girl, her handmaiden / spy, is listening in as Shay storms off. We see her like, din, 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 like spy versus spy on the back of that pillar there.
And she goes scurrying off.
Yeah, and this is that same handmaiden that plays more of a role in the future. She's always sort of mimicking Cersei's hairstyle, and she's consistently been Cersei's handmaiden throughout all these seasons. We get to see her a bunch more.
Yeah, she's been around for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
And she's around. She is the one that opens the door when, in season 7, when her and Jaime are in bed together. She's like, we'll need fresh sheets. It's the same girl.
Yeah.
Just with a different hairstyle. Like you said, it's short.
Yeah, she's always mimicking Cersei's. It's funny. Just trying to emulate her. And yeah, she obviously trusts her because she doesn't even care that she walks in when she's in bed with her brother, you know?
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. What else you got for notes?
So I have Ygritte in my notes. We find out she's, you know, in this episode, a prodigy with a bow.
Sorry.
I can't say it without an N.
That's funny.
So last episode last episode when she's shooting Jon? Yeah.
Blast
we,
him.
as a first-time viewer, don't really know that she's a prodigy with a bow.
True.
It's this episode that we find out from Tormund that
I've seen you slip a shaft through a rabbit's eye at 200 yards. If that boy is still walking, it's because you let him go.
Exactly. And her face is kind of like,
busted.
Okay. Moving on. And in this scene we meet the Thens, and
Yep.
I love the guy that plays the main Then.
Oh yeah, he's intense.
He is super intense.
He's big too.
He's big. The scarring on their faces. I mean, you can just tell that. I mean, the wildlings in general are a rough group of people, and these people are like the Vikings of the Vikings.
Yeah. That scar art, man, is really intense. Like, that's not... You can tell these people are different.
Yeah, and they're cannibals. I mean, he's talking about, you know, they came from the south. They found some good meat down there.
Maybe everything is just better fed down here. Fat and lazy.
I think he was talking about the village where Ollie comes from.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because they raided that village. So,
or maybe, did they do that already? I think they raid that together once, now that they're joined up.
Oh, you're right. You are so right. Because Tormund is in that as well. And Ygritte is there too. I can't say her name. It's
only a reason, like, I wouldn't have corrected you, but I just know that people listening would, like, get mad at us for it.
No, that's fine. I'm glad you did, because I originally, when I first watched the show, I thought it was Ingrid.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was Ingrid. And her face is kind of like, oh, okay. Moving on.
Yeah, Oh, that's funny. Yeah. It's egret or egret, depending on who's saying it. But I think it's like, you know how like sometimes they'll have like a name like Peter and they'll spell it weird, Petyr. Mm-hmm. Like they took the name of the bird egret and just like changed the spelling and made it instead of EGRETYGRITTE.
No, that's totally fine. I'm glad you corrected me because I don't want to sound like an idiot.
Oh, good. I just don't want to be like insulted about it. You know?
Oh God, no. It takes a lot to insult me.
That's good for a change.
You know, we see that the Thenns are, you know, in fact, cannibals, and they're a very intense group of people. And I love Tormund when he goes, "I fucking hate Thenns."
Yeah.
It's just one of the best lines in the show.
Fucking hate Thenns. Tormund is, you know, like, we get three guys who are, like, epic in this one certain way, which is the Hound and Bronn and Tormund. They all have a mouth that says hilarious shit, and they all are really good at fighting and are rugged. And those are, like, there's, like, the trifecta of those three, which are just awesome.
Totally. What are some notes that you have?
Let's see. Oh, in the same scene, Ygritte is doing her thing, and the Thenn shows up and asks, "Is she yours?" to Tormund, and you know, basically Ygritte is nobody's property. Nobody tells Ygritte what to do at all, and she stands up. "I'm not anybody's," and cocks back her bow and puts it right to the guy's neck.
And he kind of leans into it.
Yeah.
He's like, what are you going to do?
She's just so badass. And I know Johnny Stitches loves Ygritte. So I know he's like, yeah, Ygritte. Like, he loves this moment, I'm sure. And then the Thenn kind of like plays it off. Like, he tries to pretend he's not bothered by the bow, you know, and he's like, too scrawny. You know? Like, not like those crows at Castle Black. Yeah, she is. Think of them stuck in their larders, stuffing their faces with ham and blood, sausage and stew, getting nice and fat and marbled. It is just so creepy how he keeps alluding to how they're cannibals by referring to humans in like food
being
terms.
Marbled.
Yeah, marbled or fat and lazy. Like, you don't know he's talking about humans at that point, but it becomes abundantly clear when he says marbled. And then, yeah, like you mentioned before, I know we've had our differences, Tormund, but just one time before you die, you really ought to try Crow.
Crow.
Yeah, you see the arm on the cooking spit.
Oh, it's so gross.
Long pig. Yeah, that's
cannibal
name for human is long pig. Apparently it tastes kind of similar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it tastes similar to pig. Yeah, it's pretty messed up.
That's so gross.
Super gross.
I have Marjorie and the Queen of Thorns.
Nice. Yeah, that was a fun scene.
I love when Brienne comes in and the Queen of Thorns
just goes,
aren't you just marvelous?
Singular.
Absolutely singular.
Yeah, it's cool because Brienne never gets any respect. You know, everybody, she's like Rodney Dangerfield. She gets no respect. You know, everybody's always making fun of her size or saying she's hideous looking or making bets to see who can take her maidenhead.
They're just poking at her, yeah.
Jaime's talking shit the whole time they're on their journey, at least before Harrenhal, and you know, all this chaos. So it's good to see her finally get some respect. And the Lady Olenna, like, talking about how she's just magnificent, and there's like a flicker of a smile on Brienne's face when during that scene, you know, where you can see how she's happy that someone is seeing her for who she is. And of course it's Queen Olenna that looks up to Brienne, because Queen Olenna is all about having women be the strength of the family and like suppressing the men are idiots and everything. And in her family, they are kind of idiots. But yes, of course she's going to idolize this giant woman who's just like a picture of strength and glory and supremacy. You know what I mean? It's
completely.
Just, yeah. So it makes sense that it's Olenna who has this reaction, and it's just good to see Brienne, get props for once. you smashed. I heard you smashed my grandson into the dirt, like the little boy that he is, right? It's so funny.
Yes, which is so a coup to what Catelyn said when she was at Renly's camp, and she said to Loras, my son is actually fighting a war, not just playing at one.
Right, like a little boy.
A little boy.
Good call. A couple minutes before this, too, or a minute before, it's unreal how they're looking at all this crazy valuable jewelry, and Olenna just she's like, oh, your grandfather gave me a necklace just like this one for my 51st name day, and whoop, just throws it over the fucking ledge.
Oh, I know.
All those handmaidens are probably like, yeah, like who, they all scurry off to go get jewelry because whoever gets the best one gets to keep the second best one. One of them had to have come back later to try to find that piece that got thrown off that ledge.
Oh,
right?
I would have been down there digging too.
Oh, yeah.
Where did that go?
Yeah, totally. So funny.
I loved Marjorie's comment about Joffrey would just want me to wear a string of sparrow heads around my neck.
You watch that, even here, even with me. And Marjorie was careless there.
It's true. There's spiders in the garden.
Yeah, there are. Good line. So good thing she has Olenna. And it's good we see Olenna is tutoring Marjorie, and obviously most of her skills come from Olenna. All kinds of skills, if you know what I mean.
Skills. She has skills.
She's got jewelry skills. She's got secrecy skills, seduction skills.
Oh my god, and can I just comment on Joffrey's statue when they're walking through the gardens? Oh my word.
I didn't even notice the statue, so
are you serious?
Yeah.
When Marjorie and Brienne are walking through the gardens, just talking and kind of reconnecting, as they walk away, their bodies are blocking this statue. So as they walk away, there's the statue of Joffrey. Standing over a dead wolf with a crossbow. Shit. And then the way he's standing in the statue, the very next scene that cuts over is Joffrey standing in that exact position.
That's
this
great.
Is horrible.
I'm gonna have to go back and take a look at that because
it's pretty
really
great cinematography.
I think I know which pose you're talking about.
Yeah, he's looking off to the side with his hands on his hips.
yeah, that sounds about right. That's so funny.
Yeah.
So then Brienne and it takes a walk with Marjorie basically, and she asks her to come with her, and what Olenna says, "You dare not refuse."
I know.
Otherwise she will smite you. Great
She'll
line.
Freaking hammer you into the ground.
Yeah, like in one of those giants we were talking about earlier.
Seriously.
Speaking of giants and giant's blood, it's George R. R. Martin has confirmed that Brienne is a descendant of Sir Duncan the Tall, who is known for being giant in stature as well. So
interesting.
Makes sense.
And Sir Duncan the Tall was mentioned in this episode.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. Just wait, there's a lot of cool stuff in the books, especially with Brienne, little hints to her lineage. Pay attention when you get to the part where she has to repaint a shield. You might catch it. If not, ask me when we get there, or maybe you heard me talk about it on Still Smug or something.
I've heard you talk about it on Still Smug.
Nice. So she's walking along with Marjorie, and Marjorie's like, a shadow? A shadow with the face of Stannis Baratheon. I swear to you, by all the gods, it was Stannis. He plunged his sword through Renly's heart and disappeared. And Marjorie seems less shocked than most people would probably be by the revelation of the existence of shadow demons forged by blood magic. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? She sort of takes it in stride.
She didn't really look at her as crazy. Yeah. She's like,
Yeah, so one day, my lady, I will avenge our king. And Marjorie corrects her, Joffrey is our king now. Oh, I meant no offense, and you've given none. Because they both obviously like Renly better. They both,
of course.
And Marjorie is just essentially warning her to watch out. People may be listening, sort of like Olenna did with with her a minute beforehand. So Marjorie's a quick learner, as we know.
Yes.
Helping out Brienne too, and that's just a funny little scene. I'm really surprised at how like Marjorie was not shocked by the shadow demon revelation. Like, what? I would be like, Brienne, what the fuck are you talking about? What?
She's either so immaculately groomed to not bring up or, entertain conversation like that, or it may,
or she just like is not.
I think Highgarden, they're a little bit more free and open, so it may not just be so taboo to talk about that in Highgarden. I don't know. It's a good pickup. I'd be curious to know why she isn't like dismissive of it.
Well, that
There's
makes
a few
two
ways
of
it
us.
could go. Yeah,
but it takes more than two to tango, or something like that. Billy Madison.
Yes.
So there's a funny moment. Jaime and Sir Meryn are planning and explaining the plan to Joffrey, who's like barely even paying attention. And he's like, Your Grace. Joffrey's like, huh? In La La Land. Kind of funny. Just shows you how like he's not made for running a kingdom. His mind is elsewhere. That's when he notices the white book, the Book of Brothers, as he calls it, and starts flipping through this book. And this is fun for me because I love these characters that we just get bits and pieces of on the show, like Sir Arthur Dayne.
The Sword of the Morning.
Yeah. Who we get to see later on in season 7, when right before we learn the true identity of Jon Snow. Which Jon Snow is like, it's sort of, it's like, it rhymes with John Doe, which is a placeholder that they give unidentified bodies before determining their true identity. So it makes perfect sense for Jon Snow to be named Jon Snow as like a placeholder before we learn his true identity of Aegon Targaryen, which is cool.
Very, very true.
So he's flipping through and looking at Sir Arthur Dayne's page, and it's interesting. He led the attack on the Kingswood Brotherhood, defeated the Smiling Knight in single combat, and the Sword of the Morning, Sir Arthur Dayne, the last Sword of the Morning, is the one who knighted Sir Jaime, and he's like Sir Jaime's idol. Sir Jaime looked up to Sir Arthur Dayne more than anybody else. He's widely renowned as like the greatest fighter in the kingdoms at that point. Him and Sir Barristan, and Jaime just idolized him and tried to live up to everything that Arthur Dayne was. So the fact that Jaime's page is empty, and the fact that he's now known as like the Kingslayer and the like all these horrible things, man without honor, it just sort of rubs in even farther that like he hasn't been able to live up to Sir Arthur Dayne, his idol, it's a real sore spot for Jaime.
Yeah, and I just feel like in this scene, Joffrey is just totally belittling Jaime for
Every way
being
he
captured
can,
and gloating about, winning the war. And, from what we know, it's also sad for Jaime in this scene too, because Jaime knows Joffrey is his son. And so Joffrey is doing this to his dad, and it's like in this moment, true. Joffrey like doesn't know that, but it just puts a whole different kind of spin on, the level of hurt that he's probably feeling, like not living up to his idol. His son is belittling him, and he can't really, he's not in any type of position to put him in his place from a fatherly perspective, or even just a knightly perspective, because Joffrey's the king and he just has to sit there and take it. And Jaime's not the type of person to sit there and take it. Yeah,
it's pretty brutal. So he says, Sir Jaime Lannister, and looks at the like pretty much blank page. Someone forgot to write down all your great deeds.
What an asshole.
Yeah, and so Jaime says there's still time. And I'm thinking that this probably is foreshadowing that Jaime still has some really important role to play in the future. And some people even speculate that Jaime may be Azor Ahai reborn.
Ooh, yes. Yeah. I've heard a couple theories on that as well. And they're very good.
Yeah, there's some good theories. Yeah. So Joff responds, "Is there? For a 40-year-old knight with one hand? How can you protect me with that, you know?"
It's so pompous.
Like you said before, I use my left hand now, Your Grace. Makes for more of a contest.
Yes.
So right before that, though, Joff had come upon the page in the White Book of Sir Duncan the Tall, and which actually is 4 pages, which he points out. He must have been quite a man. So they say, Jamie says. And this is the Duncan, also known as Dunk, from the Tales of Dunk and Egg, which Bran loved to hear so much as a child. If you might remember in season 1, old Nan is by his bedside after he becomes crippled, and she's asking him, you know, don't you want to hear, you want to hear some more tales of Dunk and Egg? They were always your favorite. And he's like, no, those are kid stories. I'm an adult. And that's when she tells him about the long
stories.
night. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in case anybody wants to hear some of these Dunk and Egg stories, there are actually a number of them available to experience. George R. R. Martin has released a series of novellas where these stories are published as part of larger collections, essentially. And there's the Hedge Knight, which is the first one, the Sworn Sword, which is the second one, I think, and I can't remember what the third one's called at this moment, but they're basically these stories of Dunk, who's a knight, and his tales with this little, he's traveling around with this little dude, this little kid named Egg, who there may be something special about him. He shaves his head bald like an egg and has purple eyes. You should read those stories to find out more about Egg's secret and Sir Duncan's secret. But it's interesting that Nan would be telling Bran about these tales because these are Targaryen lore tales, basically. Sir Duncan was he was like the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard under Aegon V, Aegon the Just, he was called. So these would be, you know, obviously the Targaryens had a little bit of animosity with the Starks, so it's after the Robert's Rebellion and everything. So it's interesting that Bran would be raised on tales from the Targaryen history. Although, I mean, I guess everybody gets told all this history stuff pretty much, at least all like the people that grow up in castles, you know. But more interestingly is that the next Dunk and Egg tale to be released by GoM will be called The She-Wolves of Winterfell. So apparently Dunk and Egg have been to Winterfell. And this makes sense because of Hodor's existence. Hodor is giant, like Brienne and like Sir Duncan the Tall. And we know that Hodor is old Nan's either grandson or great-grandson or something because she's super old, right? But this would make sense if Sir Duncan went to Winterfell. He could have gotten with old Nan, basically, which would make sense. She would have a love for Sir Duncan, and she would want to tell his stories and pass on these tales, these famous tales of Dunk and Egg to Bran as he's growing up, and to the Stark kids as they're growing up, because she has a personal connection with this character. There's theories that old Nan, who arrived at Winterfell at one point, may actually be a character we've already encountered in the Dunk and Egg novellas before, a character called the Red Widow from the second Dunk and Egg novella. And they, as far as we know, never saw each other again, but apparently the Red Widow left this place in Dorne, I believe, and she may have ended up in Winterfell, and they may have been reunited, which we would learn in the She-Wolves of Winterfell if it's true, I'm assuming. So it's entirely possible that the theories of Hodor being a descendant of Sir Duncan the Tall could be confirmed as well when the She-Wolves of Winterfell is released. So I'm excited for that. And if you guys want some more really fun Game of Thrones material, I highly recommend the Dunk and Egg novellas. They take place about 100 years before Game of Thrones begins, and they're during the Blackfire rebellions. So lots of fun stuff to learn from those. Sir Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall.
And your namesake.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I'm named after Sir Duncan the Tall. Yeah. Because Game of Thrones was totally released in 1987 when I was born.
One can only pretend.
Yeah. Oh man, he's a great character though. He was also one of those legendary fighters who's right up there in terms of skill and prestige with Jaime Lannister and Arthur Dayne and Sir Barristan. So it's cool. That's another thing I like about the Game of Thrones stories is that the repeated use of the name Duncan, which you don't really hear many places at all. So
no, not at all.
Makes me feel a little connected. It's cool. So what else do you have? Any other notes you want to talk about?
I do. I have a short note about Dany and Dario flirt with flowers.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. He's slick.
He's pretty slick, talking about strategy, but telling her that he needs to, she needs to learn the flowers, and he's making like good points, like this one is used for this and this one's used for that. His point being is you need to kind of immerse yourself in the culture. And he goes on to talk about the harpy's gold flower, poisonous.
Oh.
And I thought that was a really excellent foreshadow of the sons of the harpy, because they're quite poisonous in her ascension to freeing the slaves.
That's a really good catch. And his sort of philosophical knowledge here, of his idea that you should learn the culture so you understand the people, it flies right in the face of Grey Worm's statement earlier that he's not a smart guy. He's totally smart.
He's very smart.
He's pretty smart, But it's also great. He ends up like handing her a bouquet of flowers at the end, And he pulls out the first flower and she's like, "Would you like to walk at the back of the train instead of riding? Like, this isn't fucking funny, And then he pulls out the second flower. "Would you like to walk without shoes?" And she's like accelerating her anger. And then she finally, like, as he walks away at the end, she's totally smiling,
Oh, she's smitten.
Yeah, he hands her the bouquet and she's like, "You are a gambler, aren't you?" "Your Grace." He walks off and she's totally smitten. She's grinning as he walks away, and you can tell that that's building into something. And I'm like, damn you, Michael Huisman! That should be me!
I like that she uses kind of the Dothraki shaming in that
Yeah.
Because it's like what she knows. Like, would you like to walk at the back of the train? Meaning like you're not on a horse.
Like Viserys had to walk.
Exactly. And then without shoes.
Yep. Like the wine salesman who tried to poison her, and they made him walk naked and everything until he died. Yep. So the like walking behind there is one level, then taking off your shoes is like the next level of punishment, and then taking off your tunic is the next level until you're naked and you're getting dragged to death, basically. Just different levels of punishment.
Yes. So that was just a funny little, a nice little quirky scene, but also some pretty strong foreshadowing there with the harpy's gold flower and it being poisonous. So
really strong.
I had to make a note of it.
Great point. And foreshadowing Dario and Dany sort of like getting along, doing their thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can definitely tell that there's an affection there between the two of them.
Yeah, definitely. Ever since the bathtub scene.
Yes, absolutely. With Fabio Naharis.
Yeah, Fabio. Eurotrash Dario.
Yeah. The last note that I have is actually a fairly significant one, but it's a very short scene. So I was going back and forth with putting it into my top 5, but it just wasn't enough of a scene to do that. But it's when Sir Dantos gives Sansa the necklace.
Nice.
That is eventually used in the assassination of King Joffrey.
Yeah, so many important things happen this episode.
Yeah, it's really a strong episode. And I loved Sir Dantos when he says, "Let my name have one more moment in the sun before it disappears from the world." Right. And I thought that was a total foreshadow of course, Littlefinger has him killed after Sansa's brought to the boat. So,
and he also says, what is it? He says that this necklace is worth more than my life, something to that effect. And he dies because of that necklace, So it really is like.
So it's a very small scene, but we, and from a first-time viewer's perspective, it's a very kind of insignificant scene, other than this kind of sad knight gives this beautiful highborn girl a necklace to wear. But as a, multiple-time viewer, we know that the assassination of King Joffrey is already in effect. That conversation has already occurred with Olenna and with Littlefinger, and it's in motion.
The wheels are in motion. Yeah, totally.
It's a very important scene that we cannot neglect to mention, because that's the start of it. And of course, we know the next episode, that's, what's coming. So
yeah. There's a little background information on Sir Dantos that I want to cover, which is kind of cool. We've talked previously about how Sir Barristan is basically Batman, that he's like the master at fighting, the best at combat. He hides in the shadows, wears a cloak, infiltrates in the darkness, and accomplishes his goals like Batman does. And it's sort of related to Sir Dantos, because Sir Dantos, like he said, he has nothing left, this is all he has. Take it, the necklace, take it, wear it. Let my name have one more moment in the sun before it disappears from the world. He's the only member of his house, House Hollard, that's still alive. And his house was wiped out at a very famous event where Barristan the Bold proved his Batman nature, called the Defiance of Duskendale. Basically, this is from Wiki of Ice and Fire again. The Defiance of Duskendale was a landmark event during the reign of Aerys II, the Mad King. It occurred somewhere around the year of 276 AC. It began when Lord Denys Darklyn of Duskendale, seemingly at the behest of his wife, Lady Sarala, refused to pay taxes, demanding a new town charter and certain rights for citizens, and ended with the extirpation of two noble families, House Darklyn and their vassals, House Hollard, Dantos' house, and a severe rift between the king and his hand of the king, Lord Tywin Lannister. This is like a pivotal moment in Westerosi history. Since Aerys wished to distance himself from his hand, Lord Tywin, he decided to deal with the Darklyns himself. Aerys went to Duskendale with the Kingsguard and a small force of men to arrest and put to death Lord Denys Darklyn. Instead, Aerys was imprisoned. During the capture, Sir Simon Hollard slew Sir Gawain Gaunt of the Kingsguard. Lord Denys continued his defiance, even as a large host sat outside of his walls, commanded by Tywin Lannister. Tywin's ability to act had been paralyzed when Lord Denys sent word that at the first sign that Tywin intended to storm the town, Lord Denys would kill the king. The defiance ended when Sir Barristan Selmy snuck into the Dun Fort, the name of their castle, the seat of House Darklyn, and rescued the king, killing Simon Hollard during their escape and avenging his fallen Kingsguard brother. Lord Denys, no longer having a hostage, immediately opened his gates and begged for mercy. Aerys, however, was not inclined to be merciful after all he had endured. He was beheaded, along with the rest of his family. His wife, Lady Sarala, was burned alive, though only after she'd been tortured and her tongue, breasts, and genitals had been cut off.
Oh my God.
Yeah. According to the Maesters, the small folk blamed the defiance on Lady Sarala, given that she was foreign-born from Myr, accused her of corrupting her husband into rebelling against his rightful king. They claim that Aerys was too merciful to her. Not one Darklyn remained alive. The same for House Hollard, who had sided with House Darklyn during the defiance, with the exception of Dantos Hollard, who was a child at the time. Sir Barristan asked for his life to be spared, and as he had saved King Aerys, the king could not refuse him. So it's interesting that Barristan, like Batman, snuck into this castle, infiltrated past the guards, past everybody, managed to exfiltrate with the king alive, which is something only Batman could do. Face it.
Totally.
And he was responsible for Sir Dantos being spared, and then Sir Dantos is responsible for the death of this king.
That's crazy.
Interesting.
I like that. I like that history. I love hearing the history of it because it just enriches the show so much, and the characters. It just gives so much more meaning behind.
There's so much going on here.
Yeah, it's like a 3-minute scene, and it's so important, and there's so much history behind it.
This act of mercy by Barristan resulted in the enabling of the murder of Joffrey, who had, it's like Barristan in a way had his revenge for Joffrey dismissing him from the Kingsguard. So, Joffrey says, you're done from the Kingsguard, get out of here. And then it turns out that the guy that Barristan saved back in the day is the one who plants the poison on Sansa.
It's poetic revenge.
It's so funny. And so Duskendale eventually was granted to House Riker. And Sir Barristan wonders occasionally, even though many years passed since then, if he had not done his duty too well at Duskendale. If he had not rescued Ares, the Mad King might well have died there as Tywin sacked a town, and then Rhaegar would have ascended the Iron Throne, mayhaps to heal the realm. Duskendale has been Sir Barristan's finest hour, yet the memory tastes bitter on his tongue. But saving Sir Dantos results in the death of King Joffrey, which ended up saving the realm anyway. To some extent by removing the new Mad King Joffrey, basically. So, it's just a twisted web of of what ifs and what could have been. And
it's true. Yeah, that's great. I mean, Barristan, he definitely has a moral compass too. So I'm sure he does have a lot of sleepless nights about, saving the Mad King.
Decisions that he's made.
But, at the same time, his actions, again, it's kind of like a karmatic effect. It's like the Mad King did what he needed to do. It got Jon Snow up to the wall, if you think about it, because if Rhaegar would have lived and survived, when he married Lyanna, Jon would unlikely be at the wall. And I mean, it's just a whole ripple effect. And we talked about this in our Reigns of Castamere episode with all the guys of, the future being the past and the past being the future, and the present changes, the future and time loops and all that stuff. So it's kind of, it rings true. You can't look at it from those details, but I'm sure Barristan, being the moral and upstanding guy that he is, he's certainly probably has lost sleep over that.
Yeah, definitely. Barristan the Bold. He's a freaking great character, man. Batman. So yeah, let my name have one more moment in the sun before it disappears from the world. And it does disappear pretty soon.
Yep.
Sansa tells him, I'll wear the necklace with pride, Sir Dantos. And she does. Which I think is, what if, she didn't wear it that day?
What would have happened? It's like, oh, crap.
Yeah. They would have had to have come up with another plan for sure. Littlefinger and Olenna, at least.
Yeah. So those were all of my notes. Did you have anything final you wanted to add?
That pretty much wraps it up for me too. So
cool.
Stay with us, guys, and we will be right back after a short break. In the reflection of a sword he sees his destiny, and he swears unto the sky, you will not have died in vain. That's Symphony X with Accolade 2 from their 2002 album, The Odyssey. And I feel like this song could have been written about Jon Snow, lamenting the death of his father Ned and promising he will not have died in vain. On the field with sword and shield, amidst the din of dying man's wails, war is waged and the battle will rage until only the righteous prevail. And we're back with news about Game of Thrones. First, from Metro. According to Metro, there is a working title for the first Game of Thrones spin-off show, which is The Long Night. This, of course, will take place during the Age of Heroes, and will probably have us waiting multiple seasons to see ice spiders the size of hounds in action, like we waited to see Dany's dragons in actions on Game of Thrones. That's super exciting, though.
That's crazy.
Right? It's going to be awesome. The Long Night.
I will watch all of the spin-offs.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, we'll podcast about them, too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that. Don't think that we're going to stop when Game of Thrones ends. No way.
Oh, heck no. All right. From Geek Tyrant, George R.R. Martin says that Game of Thrones could have gone up to 13 seasons.
Oh!
What?
Yeah.
As you all know, HBO's Game of Thrones is coming to an end after 8 seasons. The final season is upon us, but according to creator George R.R. Martin, the series could have kept going up to 13 seasons. While talking to Variety, he said, "We could have gone 11, 12, 13 seasons. David and Dan have been saying for like 5 seasons that 7 seasons is all they would go. We got them to go to 8, but not any more than that. There was a period like 5 years ago when they said they were saying 7 seasons and I was saying 10 seasons and they won. They're the ones actually working on it."
Those bastards. No, that's understandable, you know.
Totally.
Oh, man, that would have been great, though. 13 seasons. And the way they've sort of condensed book 4 and 5 into past couple seasons, just those 2 books could have been 4 seasons by themselves.
Oh, for sure.
At least. So then adding the 2 books that aren't even out yet, that pushes it up to a good 11, 12 seasons at least, for sure.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah. Oh, well.
8 seasons. It's so amazing what they've been able to do in the 7 seasons that we have available to us now, but I mean the 8th season is just, it's teed up to be epic.
Yeah.
Just epic.
Plus with even if it's only 6-hour episodes, if they're 2 hours a piece, that'll be great.
Yes.
They say never look a gift horse in the mouth.
That's very true.
We got to be thankful for what we have for season 8 or for Game of Thrones as a whole. Next, from Mental Floss, Game of Thrones star Richard Madden could be the next James Bond.
Ooh.
Stark. Robb Stark. Well, Daniel Craig will be returning to the role of the iconic super spy in the currently untitled Bond 25 film. He's been more than vocal in the past that he wants out of the franchise. To that end, longtime Bond producer Barbara Broccoli has been actively seeking a new leading man. Several names have already been floated for future products, including Superman actor Henry Cavill and Idris Elba. Again. But according to reports, Broccoli's first choice is former Game of Thrones star Richard Madden. After playing the King in the North, Robb Stark, on HBO's epic fantasy, Madden apparently impressed with Broccoli with his title role in the UK drama Bodyguard, which will drop on Netflix on October 24th. While the rumors are anonymously sourced and therefore unconfirmed, it has been reported that Broccoli is preparing to make an offer to Madden to play the world's most famous super spy. However, all other presumed candidates are all still very much viable for the role as well. Regardless of who eventually gets the part, they'll have to wait a few years for Craig and director Cary Joji Fukunaga to finish making Bond 25, which is set for a Valentine's Day 2020 release. So that's pretty interesting. I think Robb Stark could make a pretty good Bond.
I think Robb Stark or Henry Cavill would make the best. Henry Cavill with being Superman and also his role in The Tudors. I just find him a really great actor, but I do love me some Robb Stark.
Yeah.
They're both Bond.
How about this? They took an iconic American character and hired a Brit to play him when they did Henry Cavill, playing Superman. So how about John Hamm plays James Bond?
There you go.
That would be pretty cool, right?
That would be pretty cool.
John Hamm would be a great James Bond, or Matt Bomer from White Collar. I could see him playing James Bond too. He also played Bryce Larkin on Chuck, which is a highly underrated show. Actually, it's just unknown.
I don't even
People
know
don't
of that. I was just
exactly.
gonna say, I have no idea what that show is.
Chuck, all caps. It's in my top 5 favorite shows of all time. The guy who played the title character Chuck is now playing he's playing Shazam in the new Shazam movie, the DC character.
Oh yeah, okay.
Zachary Levi. But it's about, basically, to sum it up pretty quickly, it's about this guy who went to Stanford and got kicked out, and then he gets an email from a guy he went to school with, Bryce Larkin, and it just a series of flashing images. And it turns out that it's all these images with information encoded from a combination of databases from governments around the world, intelligence databases, CIA, FBI, Shin Bet, Mossad, all these databases combined, and it all gets programmed into Chuck's mind. And so when the database is destroyed, he sort of ends up being he is the database. He becomes a CIA asset, and he just knows stuff, like he'll have these flashes.
He's like Bran.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Totally. He has these flashes, and he's like, the prime minister is going to be at this location, and he's like, how do I know that? And all of a sudden he has that Neo moment from the Matrix where all of a sudden he's like, guys, I know kung fu, type thing.
Oh yeah, okay.
And he's awesome.
I'm gonna check it out.
It's a great show. Yeah, it's a really, really good show.
Is it on Netflix or?
It used to be. I don't know. We'll figure out some way so you can get a. I'll try to find it too. But yeah, it's really good. Anybody out there that wants a good show with a good solid four seasons, I believe, check out Chuck. Love that show.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Next, we're going to jump into our Game of Thrones and history segment from Ranker.com, real historical figures who inspired Game of Thrones characters. And we covered a bunch last week, so we'll cover some more this week. And the article is by Tricia Sorayas Murray. First, this week, we have Margaret of Anjou also inspired Cersei Lannister. Margaret of Anjou was forced to marry Henry VI to create an alliance between England and France, much like Cersei Lannister was married off to Robert Baratheon to bring their houses together. People questioned the legitimacy of both women's sons, which they were right to do in Cersei's case. Incidentally, their sons were both sadistic little brats who were eventually murdered.
Great. I love that.
Yeah.
Sadistic little brats.
Yeah.
Okay. So next we have Edward of Westminster, Prince of Wales, is also Joffrey Baratheon. As the possibly illegitimate son of King Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou, Edward of Lancaster, also known as Edward of Westminster or Edward, Prince of Wales, had a socially awkward upbringing that tipped his normalcy scale a bit south of sane.
That's a great way to put it.
Right? Same with Joffrey.
Yep.
Much like the illegitimate Joffrey, Edward decided that other opinions didn't matter to the rich and powerful, so he found his own ways to nurture his madness. Unfortunately for his people, his favorite therapeutic pastime was cutting off enemies' heads.
Oh.
Interesting. He had a lot of enemies. Edward, well, a guy like that probably would.
Yeah.
Edward was eventually murdered in a The North Remembers kind of way when he was stabbed to death by Edward IV, the historical equivalent of Robb Stark. Ooh, so
Killer.
kind of inverted justice there.
Yeah, that's so funny. Next, Cecily Neville, Duchess of York, is Catelyn Stark. Cecily Neville devoted her life to keeping her 8 children, including Edward IV, the historical version of Robb Stark, out of harm's way during the War of the Roses. She had the same fiery protectiveness as Catelyn Stark, who just wanted her family to be safe. Both women followed House Tully's motto, family, duty, honor, which made their sons' decisions to abandon their betrothal promises nearly unforgivable. Cecily may have overreacted a wee bit by never speaking to her son again, but she presumably loved him as much as Catelyn still clearly loved Robb, while she took in the horror of the Red Wedding. And just so you guys know, the War of the Roses that this excerpt mentions was between 2 main houses in England, the Yorks and the Lancasters. And the War of the Roses is mirrored in Game of Thrones by the ongoing war between the Starks and the Lannisters. Stark, Lannister, York, Lancaster. Love how George
Very
incorporates
close.
all these things.
It's so crazy. And whether, like, some of them, I'm sure most of them are intentional, but maybe some of them are unintentional. It's
Right.
just uncanny,
Yeah.
the parallels to our
I'm sure some of it has to be unintentional, right?
I can't imagine him taking all of this history and having it all meshed together in such a beautiful, poetic way.
Yes.
But we all know he's a genius, so
True.
It very well could be, but I would say most of it is, and some of it
yeah, I would agree. Sometimes I think when you just get so plugged into something, like if you've studied a lot of history, or if you just plug yourself into the spirit of some type of something, that sometimes things like this can just happen, like you're inadvertently recreating an archetype that's lingering in your mind or something like that. But most of this is definitely intentional. It's got to be.
Yes, it has to be, for sure. So the next is Richard III of England is Ned Stark. Setting aside speculation that Richard III may have been a bit evil, what with possibly killing his nephews and all, the British... that's kind of evil, I would say. The British king shared several traits with the beloved Ned Stark. Both men were popular in the North, led their people with peace, and believed in loyalty above all other things. Richard lived by the motto, "Loyalty binds me," and Ned followed the same unspoken words even as he realized they would likely lead to his demise. Like his wife, Ned lived by his beliefs until the very end. And if that's not loyalty, what is?
Nice. Next, we have Elizabeth of York is Sansa Stark. And wow, the picture of these two.
I was just going to
combined.
say, it's kind of uncanny.
Yeah, pretty similar looking. Before she became known as Henry VIII's mother, Elizabeth of York was simply a girl who wanted to be queen. Just as Sansa spent her younger years twirling around and dreaming of a happily ever after royal wedding, Elizabeth practiced the grace, obedience, and vanity expected of any future queen. Both girls were physically similar, with tall, skinny statures and golden red hair. Elizabeth was so lovely that we still use the Queen of Hearts playing card that was modeled after her. Interesting, I didn't know that. Sansa and Elizabeth's mutual desires to be queen changed a bit over time as the fairy tale was overtaken by politics. From the moment she was born, Elizabeth was shopped around as a prospective bride to secure an alliance, just as the Starks, Lannisters, and Boltons bounced Sansa around because of her birthright. Sansa's story is still being written, but only time will tell if she's able to trump Elizabeth's playing card legacy or die trying.
Interesting. I will say their pictures are very, they look alike too.
Yeah, given that, it makes sense that they went with casting. I mean, not that I would have criticized the casting anyway of Sophie Turner as Sansa Stark. I think she does a great job. But if indeed these historical parallels are intentional, then it makes sense that GoM would have been looking for somebody who looks like Elizabeth of York, which makes Sophie Turner fit perfectly.
Yeah, I was going to say the one of Cersei and Margaret of Anjou looks very similar as well.
Yeah, true. That stained glass picture.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's stained glass versus a human being, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, definitely, with the twirly blonde hair and whatnot.
But Sansa's and Elizabeth of York is the most uncanny of all of them.
Dead ringer, for sure.
What's that?
You hear that
Do you
too?
hear that?
The hell is that? Oh God, it's birds!
Ravens!
Lady Sarah Larkham says, "It was sad, Sansa telling about how her mother and brother were killed. That monologue was so haunting and amazing. And when Sansa gets the necklace from Sir Dantos, the whole necklace conspiracy started, which led to Joffrey's death and the Purple Wedding."
Sir Matthew of House Rep. What the fuck, salami?
I like how he has it like, what the fuck, salami?
It's great. Oh, Sir Matthew, you're funny.
Yeah.
Season 4 is off to a great start. Two Swords, of course, refers to the melting of the Stark Greatsword ice into Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail, but could just as easily be about Arya and the Hound's tavern battle. Arya gets her beloved needle back and crosses the first name off her list. Oh, that's true. Polliver was one of the first names on her list.
Oh, yeah. That's important too.
Good
I can't believe we
catch.
didn't mention that.
Yeah, good catch, Sir Matthew.
And also two swords like her and the Hound, facing off against 5 men. It's pretty cool.
Totally.
It's great.
Yes, great point so far. Ugh, that slimy Janos Slint resurfaces gone from the commander of the City Watch of King's Landing to a groveling toady to Sir Alistair.
Yeah, Alistair's a scumbag too. They're meant to be together.
Completely. And what more can be said about the introduction to the Red Viper of Dorne, Oberyn, makes quite the entrance with his Inigo Montoya-esque quest for vengeance.
Yeah, so basically, the Red Viper character shows up and he has the same voice, the same accent as Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride, and he has the same theme. Inigo Montoya is like, what does he say? I'm Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Okay,
And,
I have heard that before. Okay.
And Oberyn's like, you killed my sister. Like,
Yep.
etc. Like the same thing. There's some side by sides of the two, which are great. Yeah. Total vengeance. They're
Got it.
Great mirrors. Whereas most of these characters are like historical parallels. This character is a parallel to the Princess Bride. That's great.
Good catch, Matthew.
Yeah, definitely. Lady Lisa of House Sky. Beyond the wall, Sam and Gilly make camp at an abandoned wildling hut near a heart tree and talk about possible baby names. The crows outside in the heart tree are loudly squawking and then suddenly stop and the temperature drops. The walker is coming for the baby. It is mentioned that the wildlings believe that naming a child before age 2 is unlucky, which was also a common thing in our world as well, specifically with nomads, due to low survival rate of young children. This scene got me thinking about names. Do you think there is a deeper significance to the naming of children? More name stuff. John's character arc is constructed around his name. Everything that happens to him is because of his name. Right, and it has that other significance of John Doe, which I mentioned earlier.
Exactly. I was just thinking that.
Which is cool. Lady Lisa continues, the gillyflower is a type of wallflower. Gilly has the nature of a wallflower, humble, unassuming, and lovely. She goes through the wall just as a wallflower would grow through a wall. That's
I
a
love
cool
that.
catch.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Baby Sam, freshly named, was saved from death, and adult Sam is born again as Sam the Slayer. Nice. That's cool, too.
That's really cool. That's great insight. Good job,
Yeah, thanks.
Lady Lisa.
Totally. She sent me a thing she wrote about the character from the books Patchface.
Oh, yeah.
25 pages of putting together like Patchface theories and stuff. It's pretty
Oh
cool.
my gosh.
I'm going to
That's
probably
awesome.
turn it into a little standalone episode.
Yeah, maybe you can have her like guest host it, because that would be kind of a great little sidebar.
Yeah. Patchface is really interesting too. Have you heard me talk about that stuff on Still Smug before?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Patchface. I think one of my Ravens calls went into detail about his little song, It's Always Summer Under the Sea.
Yeah, nice.
That Lady Shireen sings, and I kind of dissected it, so.
Killer. Yeah, it's going to be cool. Looking forward to producing that.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Definitely.
Sir Johnny of House Stower. Here's to the start of probably my favorite storyline, Arya and the Hound. I think it's one of the reunions I'm looking forward to seeing. The Red Viper comes in setting up Dorne and also letting us in on more of the rebellion wars and casualties of that war.
Yeah, that's true. Red Viper shows up, and it's like this whole sector of the kingdom that we were not exposed to yet is added on to the story, the whole Dorne angle. So a little bit of world building happening in season 4 here. It's pretty cool.
Yes, absolutely.
Sir Johnny has a great. He's been working on this chopper. He's been building a motorcycle. It's pretty awesome. He's got a painting company called Outlawed Paint, I believe. So yeah, check that out if you get a chance. It's pretty awesome. This bike, it looks like it's like glowing and emanating heat. It's really really good paint job. He's
I'll have to
good
check
at
it out.
Yeah, I'll post a link or something.
Hi Duncan, this is Caroline Collins, Lady Caroline, like Arbor Wine, calling in my feedback for episode 1, season 4, Two Swords. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to mention was Oberyn Martell and Ned Stark. I realized a connection between Oberyn Martell and Ned Stark, and I was noticing it as Oberyn was telling Tyrion all about his sister Aelia and her marriage to Rhaegar and what happened with that. And I realized that, he and Ned Stark are both second sons, so they were out of the line of succession originally for their houses. Ned Stark is for the far north, and Oberyn Martell is for Dorne for the furthest south of the Seven Kingdoms. And they both have sisters that were married to Rhaegar Targaryen, and both bore him children.
This is crazy.
And they both died in the rebellion.
Never thought about this.
Oberyn's obviously not very happy about how that turned out. And Ned and the Starks were really upset about Lyanna running away with Rhaegar as well. And that's kind of a big part of what got the Starks into the rebellion in the first place. Aside from Ned being a close friend with Robert, he also wanted to avenge his sister and get her back in some way. So that was really interesting to me. And I have to say, Oberyn Martell is just a fascinating character to me. The more I read about him, the more I want to know more about what he was doing and all that. He went off to Essos and studied different types of combat, and he was, I think, part of the Second Sons at some point, maybe the Golden Company, but he was a sellsword for a while, and he also forged a few links of a maester's chain, and he's just a really interesting character, a really cool guy, and a pretty great warrior as well. So that was really neat to see that connection. I'd never noticed that before. And then they do a few nods to the Duncan Egg novellas in this episode, and I love it when they do that, when they do little hints here and there to the books. They talk about Pod knowing his pageantry when he's standing out there waiting for the Dornishmen to arrive.
Right, his heraldry.
Tyrion and Bronn, and he starts naming off houses. And I thought that Tyrion taught him his pageantry, but I guess in the TV show, he comes ready-made with all of it already there. But that's a big connection to Aegon V, who was really big into knowing all the sigils of the houses. And he was really fond of showing off how much he knew about the different houses of Westeros. So I thought that was really cool. And we're going to see Pod and Lady Brienne get together later as a duo. And I know you have your theories about Lady Brienne and her lineage as far as Duncan the Tall goes. And we also hear Duncan the Tall's name mentioned at the Kingsguard in the book. So that was really neat. And we do see Brienne quite a bit in the Capitol this episode, which was nice to see. It's always funny to see her in a dress. But she's talking to Jamie, which is always wonderful to see them back together. And the Tyrells are telling her how amazing she is and everything. So, it's kind of cool to see her connected with the Kingsguard in that way. Anyway, and then one thing I did notice this episode, which I'd never noticed before, was the dusk rose. And I don't know if anyone else mentioned that, but I noticed the lighting on it and just that blue color and everything was just like, this is important. Notice this. The blue rose, I didn't realize it was called a dusk rose. I'd never noticed that before. I think
I missed the specifics
because it was Dario saying it, and I don't know why I don't pay attention to anything he says because he's supposedly stupid. But it was really cool to see that. And dusk has an extra special meaning, as in night gathers and now my watch begins. Dusk is the ending of the day and the beginning of the night.
I think there's something with a blue rose growing out of the wall, too.
It's got to mean something.
Relating to Lyanna.
It's pretty interesting. And Lyanna loved blue roses.
There you go.
And Ned brings her blue roses while she's on her deathbed. And Dario says that they treat fever. I'm like, maybe they brought her roses to make that tea to help her fever and to try and save her life when she was, dying in childbirth. So that could have been a possible connection with the blue roses. So yeah, that was really interesting that they added that, and I did notice it this time. I'd never noticed it before. Number 4, the Tyrells are shopping for jewelry, and we know Sansa gets her necklace this episode. So I never connected that before. I was like, because it was in 2 different parts of the episode. So it was not as noticeable. And you watch it a second time and it's so obvious that they must have had that necklace made. They're having all these other necklaces made. It's just one more. Getting Littlefinger into it as well. That was kind of cool that I noticed that the second time around. And then lastly, the Thens. And I'm not sure if that was the Magnar of Thens that we saw this episode or whether it's just a Then in the TV show. But I did, I was going to make a whole bunch of comments about cannibalism in the last episode, and I just, I didn't get to it, and I was like, oh, they're not going to talk about cannibalism for a while, so I'll just wait and do some research later. And then they talk about it again with the cooking of the crow's arm. And I'm like, really? It's just so in your face, because we just heard about the rat cook, and in the Red Wedding episode, we're already talking about, Black Walder pie and stuff. So I did a little bit of digging because I was like, I saw the connection between Martin and Shakespeare. Because I read a long time ago, I've read Titus Andronicus, and I was like, oh yeah, that has the baking of people in pies. And not even to mention, Sweeney Todd and all that stuff too. So, the baking of people into pies is pretty literary canon in the gruesome cannibalism division. And so I wanted to dig into it a little bit, and I just want to let everybody know that don't read the synopsis of Titus Andronicus, because it is just impossibly gruesome and horrible.
That sounds fun.
And I don't know why anybody would write something like that, but it's pretty terrible. And it was, I'm sure it was really popular in Shakespeare times. Everybody was like, wow, this is so cool. Everybody's killing each other. But it was pretty gruesome. And I've actually seen a movie, it was a few years ago now, but Anthony Hopkins did a movie called Titus, and it's an adaptation of Titus Andronicus, and I think it's produced by Julie Taymor, who, if anybody's familiar with her, she did the set design and costuming for the Lion King musical, And she's done a lot of other things too, but that's the thing that she's probably most famous for in like sort of modern day is the Lion King stuff. And she's just amazing at adaptation in general. She can take something and just make it beautiful and artistic. And so she did that with Titus, and it is like a lot of it is a bit like a fever dream. It's a bit crazy, but it is beautifully done for a gruesome tragedy. So if you are gonna like delve into Titus, if you're interested in cannibalism and hacking off people's heads and stuff, definitely check out that movie.
Thanks.
But it's I went down that rabbit hole a little bit, and I decided to dig my way back out because I couldn't read anymore. I was like, oh, maybe I'll reread it. I'm not going to reread it, but everybody else is welcome to. So that's my bit. Shakespeare is a messed up dude, and that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much. Looking forward to the next episode, and all the best. Happy days.
Thanks, Lady Caroline. Great message as usual. Lots of really cool stuff in there. Things I didn't even notice as well. So really good to hear.
Hey, Duncan, this is Zach. This is my first time sending feedback.
Good to hear from you, brother.
Nothing. Really glad to have you back. Love the podcast. So glad you're back on the air.
Thanks, man.
And hitting us full time, hot and heavy. 2 episodes a week, man. You're really busting them out. All right. Season 4, Episode 1, Two Swords. Oh, this is such a good episode. To start off with, it was the cold open. I love when the show uses cold opens. They do it very seldomly, but when they do it, it is awesome. It starts, of course, with the scene in the armorer's blacksmith forge, and the music as it starts is so incredible. As all the music on this show is absolutely phenomenal. I really want to go see Ramin Djawadi's concert experience, but I think he just recently did the last one. Anyways, so that scene starts with, you can hear a few bars of the Stark theme, and then I think I heard a few notes of the Reigns of Castamere come in, then a little bit more Stark, and then Castamere comes on strong as they put ice into the forge or whatever, and really put the heat to it, and it starts melting. You really hear the Reigns of Castamere start to come in strong, and it's just, that's heartbreaking. That sword, what it meant, absolutely just kills me.
Same here, man, for real.
And the way they used the music, and it flowed. They were doing Reigns of Castamere, and it flowed right into the opening theme song really, really well. A lot of times that's hard to do. More music stuff. The subtle music when Arya makes her kill of Polliver in the inn. With after the fight, most of the fighting's done. There's a little bit of that. It's hard to describe. Eastern kind of a sound. I think it's kind of the way her soundtrack starts to go when she goes to Bravos and trains to become a faceless man. Right when she pokes Polliver right through the throat, just like he did to Lami, that the music comes in. It's a real interesting sound. And then as they ride off from that little inn, the Stark theme comes in strong, and as they ride off, Arya has her horse, and the Hound gets his chickens. I love that scene. That's one of my favorite scenes of the entire series. Same here, man. The chickens scene with the Hound, Arya, and the Mountain's lackeys. All right. The next thing I had was this episode was basically ground zero for quotes from the Hound. He has his best quotes in this episode. He starts off, of course, with "What the fuck's salami?" And then Arya talks about naming her sword, and she says, "Lots of people name their swords," and he says, "Lots of cunts." So that's a great line from him. The conversation between Polliver and the Hound is going pretty well in the inn, and you're kind of wondering where it's going to go, and then he just says, "Fuck the king," and the whole tavern goes silent. And it cuts to Arya, and she has the best look on her face. She knows that shit is about to go down, and she's going to be able to get Polliver. Go back and watch that specific scene where the Hound says, "Fuck the king," and then Arya.
I actually rewound it and watched her eyes.
Epic look on her face. Then the Hound says, bring me one of those chickens. And then he exchanges words a few times with Polliver, and then he ups the ante. He says, "Think I'll take 2 chickens." And they talk a little bit more, and then he, of course, throws down his most famous gauntlet. He says, "I understand that if any more words come pouring out of your cunt mouth, I'm going to have to eat every fucking chicken in this room." Oh, I love that. That is excellent. Moving on. This is the second time in 2 episodes in a row that Arya runs off half-cocked, so to speak. I mean, she has a plan, but it's for her size and abilities, she kind of runs off half-cocked, killing the guys around the campfire, and then here running, they're hiding in the bushes, and then she goes running up to that little inn, and it leaves the Hound there to clean up the mess. Another meaning I found of 2 swords, obviously they turn ice into 2 swords, but another meaning is the Hound and Arya go into that inn with 1 sword, but they come out with 2 swords, Hounds, and of course she gets her needle back.
Nice.
What else? Tywin's plans versus Jaime's plans. Jaime, of course, wants to stay close to King's Landing, stay close to a certain little somebody. Tywin has plans for him to leave the King's Guard since he lost the hand, but that conversation doesn't go the way that Tywin plans it. And his quote at the end is another great quote from this episode. Tywin tells him when Jaime goes to give back the sword, he says, "I guess you want to give the sword back." And Tywin says, "Keep it. A one-handed man with no family needs all the help he can get."
Great line.
Let's see. Oberyn, when he comes into King's Landing, we meet him in the brothel, and then as he's starting to have his good time, the only thing that it takes to set Oberyn off is hearing those Lannister soldiers singing the Rains of Castamere. And that's like a blood in the water. He goes to see what those 2 guys are about. And of course, they have their little incident, and his quote there is really good. "Longsword is a bad option in close quarters," which I think y'all talked about that last week or maybe a few episodes ago. Obviously, Sir Barristan Selmy learns that in the show with what happens in Meereen.
Yeah, he does.
When Tyrion comes in, him and Bronn come in to welcome Oberyn to the city. Oberyn says they think we need more girls. We're going to need more girls. Bronn nods his head yes. At the same time, Tyrion shakes his head no. I found that was a really funny moment of the episode.
Yeah, classic.
Okay, so I have an interesting little observation. The first conversation that Oberyn and Tyrion have outside the brothel, at the end of that conversation, Oberyn tells Tyrion to tell his father, tell him the Lannisters aren't the only one who pay their debts. And this actually ends up coming to pass. Oberyn does pay his debt to Tywin in a roundabout way. Of course, after the trial, Oberyn decides to champion for Tyrion. Without a champion, Tyrion faces the trial by combat, and he obviously would have been killed. If Tyrion gets killed, Tywin doesn't get killed. So, Oberyn champions for Tyrion. Tyrion lives long enough to get sentenced to death.
Great point.
Which then, of course, Varys and Jaime do their thing, let him out, and Tyrion goes and kills his dear old dad as he's sitting on the john there. So, Oberyn does pay his debt to Tywin in a roundabout way.
Basically sacrifices himself so Tyrion can do the deed.
Okay, the whole thing with Varys, the diamonds, Shae, and Tyrion. The first time I watched this show through, I thought that Tyrion had sent Varys to Shae to get her to go and just was playing dumb when Shae confronts him about it in this episode. But upon the rewatch and thinking more about it, I do think that Varys came to Shae with the diamonds on his own.
Agreed.
He was trying to do the best thing for the realm, which is to have Tyrion focused and not have the distractions and the danger involved with having Shae in the city, especially now that he's married to Sansa. So Tyrion is genuinely, I think, when Shae confronts him about it, he's genuinely taken aback and doesn't know what she's talking about. Interested to see what you guys think about this. If you think Varys was on his own mission, or if Tyrion sent him.
I agree with you, man.
Cersei is a selfish little bitch. That's all I got to say about that. Jaime was away, got his hand chopped off, taken captive, but she's all worried. Ultimately, it's all about her and how she was left alone. I hate her so much. I hate her now in the show even more than ever. Oh, I can't wait to see what happens to her. Alistair Thorne and Janos Slynt, they still have an old way of looking at things, an old way of thinking, that it's impossible to unite the wildlings, that they don't think there are any living giants at all. Basically, like most of the Seven Kingdoms, they think that north of the wall, all the talk of snarks and grumpkins is just silliness. But Jon's trying to tell them that he's marching down on them with 100,000, an army of 100,000. And it's the truth, but they don't want to believe it. I love Jon's line to Janos Slynt here when he says, "I commanded the city watch, boy." And he says, "And now you're here. You must not have been very good at your job."
Fuck yeah.
I love that he gets a good line in there with Janos Slynt. And my last note was from Maester Aemon throwing down the gangsta line when Thorne asked him, how did you acquire this magical power about being able to tell when people are lying or not? And he said, "I grew up in King's Landing." All right, that's all my notes from Two Swords. I really appreciate the podcast. Keep it up, and we'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.
Thanks, Zach. Great message. Loved it. Lots of good stuff in there. Hope to hear from you again soon. All right, that's our show, episode 73. Thanks for listening, everybody. And a huge thanks to Lady Rachel for joining the ensemble.
Yes, I am so thankful to be a part of the Game of Microphones family. I just love this podcast, and of course I love this show, so I'm really excited to continue talking about this rewatch with you, Duncan.
Likewise, and we'll be planning on bringing in additional guests as well, even though you'll be regularly joining us, so...
Awesome.
I'm considering doing some contests to get listeners involved, and can have special listener guests as well, and we'll be for sure having Patrick and Travis and Johnny back, and a lot of new guest hosts as well, so look forward to that.
I love that, because I love hearing everybody's take on what they come up with this rewatch. It's always so eye-opening to other people's perspectives, so I think that's awesome.
Definitely, I agree. Next episode, we'll be covering Season 4, Episode 2, The Lion and the Rose.
The Purple Wedding.
Yeah. Yup, it's going to be great. Give us a watch. Give us a watch. Please, Rolex. Give it a watch and send us your thoughts. We'd love to read them on air. If you'd like to call, you can always call us at 813-JOFFREY. That's 813-563-3739.
If you'd like to write in, you can email us at ravens@gameofmicrophones.com.
And another good thing to do if you're going to email us, you don't necessarily have to call. You can record your own audio on your voice memos app on your phone, for instance. It usually has really, really high quality audio. And you can email us audio files like the listeners you've heard today both did. And it's a great way to get your voice heard in quality audio, which is really cool. You can also check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/GOM podcast. And go there this week to check out the links we talked about being posted. They'll be there for you to enjoy.
Imp slap. Oh. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at GOM Podcasts. Give us a like on Facebook and an iTunes rating/review.
Kristen and other Podcastica hosts are continuing their coverage of Game of Thrones over at their new podcast, House Podcastica. They have released a new episode covering Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 1, Two Swords. You can find that at housepodcastica.com or by searching for House Podcastica on your favorite podcast platform. All right, that's our show, everybody.
Thanks for listening.
A work of art, really. The craftsmanship is excellent. You like it so much, you're welcome to chop off your own hand and take it.
Such an ingrate. I spent days with the goldsmith getting the details just right.
Days.
Better part of an afternoon.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and free 30-day 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/GOM. The seed is strong.
The seed is strong. I'm not sure from Lancel, but...
Yeah, true.
And now you're here. You must not have been very good at your job.
A bastard son of a traitor.
Yeah, what would you expect?
I commanded the city watch of King's Landing, boy.
A man's gotta have a code.
Yep. Hiding in the bushes, creeper style. Stop hitting yourself. Stop stabbing yourself. Stop stabbing yourself. You know.
And she has her pony.
Oh, she's got her. She's got a horse. She's got Needle on her belt. Hound's got his chicken, and everybody's happy. Melting eyeballs and everything.
Dracarys.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so gross.
Long pig. And Marjorie, seems less shocked than most people would probably be by the revelation of the existence of shadow demons forged by blood magic.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
All right, that's a wrap.